Chapter 9, Part 2 of Hilda Wade. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Lars Rolander. Hilda Wade, A Woman with Tenacity of Purpose by Grant Allen. Chapter 9, Part 2. At lunch that day, Hilda played her first card with delicious unconsciousness. Apparent unconsciousness, for when she chose she was a consummate actress. She played it at a moment when Lady Meadowcroft, who by this time was burning with curiosity on our account, had paused from her talk with her husband to listen to us. I happened to say something about some Oriental curios belonging to an aunt of mine in London. Hilda seized the opportunity. "What did you say was her name?" she asked blandly. "Why, Lady Tepping," I answered in perfect innocence. "She has a fancy for these things, you know. She brought a lot of them home with her from Burma." As a matter of fact, as I have already explained, my poor dear aunt is an extremely commonplace old army widow, whose husband happened to get knighted among the New Year's honors for some brush with the natives on the Shan frontier. But Lady Meadowcroft was at the stage where a title is a title, and the discovery that I was the nephew of a titled person evidently interested her. I could feel rather than see that she glanced significantly aside at Sir Ivor, and that Sir Ivor in return made a little movement of his shoulders equivalent to "I told you so." Now Hilda knew perfectly well that the aunt of whom I spoke was Lady Tepping, so I felt sure that she had played this card of malice prepense to pique Lady Meadowcroft. But Lady Meadowcroft herself seized the occasion with inartistic avidity. She had hardly addressed us as yet. At the sound of the magic passport, she pricked up her ears and turned to me suddenly. "Burma?" she said, as if to conceal the true reason for her change of front. "Burma! I had a cousin there once. He was in the Gloucestershire regiment." "Indeed?" I answered. My tone was one of utter unconcern in her cousin's history. "Miss Wade, will you take Bombay ducks with your curry?" In public I thought it wise under the circumstances to abstain from calling her Hilda. It might lead to misconceptions. People might suppose we were more than fellow travelers. "You have had relations in Burma?" Lady Meadowcroft persisted. I manifested a desire to discontinue the conversation. "Yes," I answered coldly. "My uncle commanded there." "Commanded there? Really, Ivor, do you hear? Dr. Cumberledge's uncle commanded in Burma." A faint intonation of the word commanded drew unobtrusive attention to its social importance. "May I ask what was his name? My cousin was there, you see." An insipid smile. "We may have friends in common." "He was a certain Sir Malcolm Tepping," I blurted out, staring hard at my plate. "Tepping? I think I've heard Dick speak of him, Ivor." "Your cousin," Sir Ivor answered with emphatic dignity, "is certain to have mixed with nobbut the highest officials in Burma." "Yes, I'm sure Dick used to speak of a certain Sir Malcolm. My cousin's name, Dr. Cumberledge, was Maltby, Captain Richard Maltby." "Indeed?" I answered with an icy stare. "I cannot pretend to the pleasure of having met him." Be exclusive to the exclusive, and they burn to know you. From that moment forth Lady Meadowcroft pestered us with her endeavors to scrape acquaintance. Instead of trying how far she could place her chair from us, she set it down as near us as politeness permitted. She entered into conversation whenever an opening afforded itself, and we two stood off haughtily. She even ventured to question me about our relation to one another. "Miss Wade is your cousin, I suppose?" she suggested. "Oh dear no," I answered with a glassy smile. "We are not connected in any way." "But you are traveling together?" "Merely as you and I are traveling together, fellow passengers on the same steamer." "Still, you have met before?" "Yes, certainly. Miss Wade was a nurse at St. Nathaniel's in London, where I was one of the house doctors. When I came on board at Cape Town after some months in South Africa, I found she was going by the same steamer to India, which was literally true. To have explained the rest would have been impossible, at least to anyone who did not know the whole of Hilda's history. "And what are you both going to do when you get to India?" "Really, Lady Meadowcroft," I said severely, "I have not asked Miss Wade what she is going to do. If you inquire of her point blank, as you have inquired of me, I dare say she will tell you. For myself, I am just a globe-trotter amusing myself. I only want to have a look round at India." "Then you are not going out to take an appointment?" "My George, Emmy," the burly Yorkshireman put in with an air of annoyance, "you are cross-questioning Dr. Cumberledge, no less than cross-questioning him." I waited a second. "No," I answered slowly, "I have not been practicing of late. I am looking about me. I travel for enjoyment." That made her think better of me. She was the kind, indeed, who think better of a man if they believe him to be idle. She dawdled about all day on deck chairs, herself seldom even reading, and she was eager now to drag Hilda into conversation. Hilda resisted. She had found a volume in the library which immensely interested her. "What are you reading, Miss Wade?" Lady Meadowcroft cried at last, quite savagely. It made her angry to see anybody else pleased and occupied when she herself was listless. "A delightful book," Hilda answered. "The Buddhist Praying Wheel by William Simpson." Lady Meadowcroft took it from her and turned the pages over with a languid air. "Looks awfully dull," she observed with a faint smile, at last returning it. "It's charming," Hilda retorted, glancing at one of the illustrations. "It explains so much. It shows one why one turns round one's chair at cards for luck, and why, when a church is consecrated, the bishop walks 3 times about it sunwise." "Our bishop is a dreadfully prosy old gentleman," Lady Meadowcroft answered, gliding off at a tangent on a personality, as is the wont of her kind. "He had, oh, such a dreadful quarrel with my father over the rules at St. Alphege schools at Millington." "Indeed?" Hilda answered, turning once more to her book. Lady Meadowcroft looked annoyed. It would never have occurred to her that within a few weeks she was to owe her life to that very abstruse work, and what Hilda had read in it. That afternoon, as we watched the flying fish from the ship's side, Hilda said to me abruptly, "My chaperon is an extremely nervous woman." "Nervous about what?" "About disease, chiefly. She has the temperament that dreads infection, and therefore catches it." "Why do you think so?" "Haven't you noticed that she often doubles her thumb under her fingers, folds her fists across it so, especially when anybody talks about anything alarming. If the conversation happens to turn on jungle fever or any subject like that, down goes her thumb instantly, and she clasps her fist over it with a convulsive squeeze. At the same time, too, her face twitches. I know what that trick means. She's horribly afraid of tropical diseases, though she never says so." "And you attach importance to her fear?" "Of course. I count upon it as probably our chief means of catching and fixing her." "As how?" She shook her head and quizzed me. "Wait and see. You are a doctor, I a trained nurse. Before 24 hours, I foresee she will ask us. She is sure to ask us, now she has learned that you are Lady Tipping's nephew, and that I am acquainted with several of the best people." That evening, about 10 o'clock, Sir Ivor strolled up to me in the smoking room with affected unconcern. He laid his hand on my arm and drew me aside mysteriously. The ship's doctor was there, playing a quiet game of poker with a few of the passengers. "I beg your pardon, Dr. Cumberledge," he began in an undertone. "Could you come outside with me a minute? Lady Meadowcroft has sent me up to you with a message." I followed him on to the open deck. "It is quite impossible, my dear sir," I said, shaking my head austerely, for I divined his errand. "I can't go and see Lady Meadowcroft. Medical etiquette, you know, the constant and salutary rule of the profession. Why not? He asked, astonished. The ship carries a surgeon, I replied in my most precise tone. He is a duly qualified gentleman, very able in his profession, and he ought to inspire your wife with confidence. I regard this vessel as Dr. Boyel's practice, and all on board it as virtually his patients. Sir Ivor's face fell. But Lady Meadowcroft is not at all well, he answered, looking piteous, and she can't endure the ship's doctor, such a common man, you know. His loud voice disturbs her. You must have noticed that my wife is a lady of exceptionally delicate nervous organization. He hesitated, beamed on me, and played his trump card. She dislikes being attended by aught but a gentleman. If a gentleman is also a medical man, I answered, his sense of duty toward his brother practitioners would of course prevent him from interfering in their proper sphere, or putting upon them the unmerited slight of letting them see him preferred before them. Then you positively refuse? He asked wistfully, drawing back. I could see he stood in a certain dread of that imperious little woman. I conceded a point. I will go down in 20 minutes, I admitted, looking grave. Not just now, lest I annoy my colleague, and I will glance at Lady Meadowcroft in an unprofessional way. If I think her case demands treatment, I will tell Dr. Boyle. And I returned to the smoking room and took up a novel. 20 minutes later, I knocked at the door of the lady's private cabin, with my best bedside manner in full play. As I suspected, she was nervous, nothing more. My mere smile reassured her. I observed that she held her thumb fast, doubled under in her fist, all the time I was questioning her, as Hilda had said. And I also noticed that the fingers closed about it convulsively at first, but gradually relaxed as my voice restored confidence. She thanked me profusely and was really grateful. On deck next day she was very communicative. They were going to make the regular tour first, she said, but were to go on to the Tibetan frontier at the end, where Sir Ivor had a contract to construct a railway in a very wild region. Tigers? Natives? Oh, she didn't mind either of them, but she was told that that district, what did they call it? The Terai or something, was terribly unwholesome. Fever was what you may call it there, yes. Endemic, that was the word. Oh, thank you, Dr. Cumberledge. She hated the very name of fever. Now you, Miss Wade, I suppose, with an awestruck smile, are not in the least afraid of it. Hilda looked up at her calmly. Not in the least, she answered. I have nursed hundreds of cases. Oh my, how dreadful! And never caught it? Never. I'm not afraid, you see. I wish I wasn't. Hundreds of cases. It makes one ill to think of it. And all successfully? Almost all of them? You don't tell your patients stories when they are ill about other cases who died, do you? Lady Meadowcroft went on with a quick little shudder. Hilda's face by this time was genuinely sympathetic. Oh, never, she answered, with truth. That would be very bad nursing. One's object in treating a case is to make one's patient well. So one naturally avoids any sort of subject that might be distressing or alarming. You really mean it? Her face was pleading. Why, of course. I try to make my patients my friends. I talk to them cheerfully. I amuse them and distract them. I get them away as far as I can from themselves and their symptoms. Oh, what a lovely person to have about one when one's ill! The languid lady exclaimed ecstatically. I should like to send for you if I wanted nursing. But there, it's always so, of course, with a real lady. Common nurses frighten one so. I wish I could always have a lady to nurse me. A person who sympathizes, that is the really important thing, Hilda answered in her quiet voice. One must find out first one's patient's temperament. You are nervous, I can see. She laid one hand on her new friend's arm. You need to be kept amused and engaged when you are ill. What you require most is insight and sympathy. The little fist doubled up again. The vacant face grew positively sweet. That's just it. You have hit it. How clever you are. I want all that. I suppose, Miss Wade, you never got out for private nursing? Never, Hilda answered. You see, Lady Meadowcroft, I don't nurse for a livelihood. I have means of my own. I took up this work as an occupation and a sphere in life. I haven't done anything yet but hospital nursing. Lady Meadowcroft drew a slight sigh. What a pity, she murmured slowly. It does seem hard that your sympathies should all be thrown away, so to speak, on a horrid lot of wretched poor people, instead of being spent on your own equals, who would so greatly appreciate them. I think I can venture to say the poor appreciate them too, Hilda answered, bridling up a little, for there was nothing she hated so much as class prejudices. Besides, they need sympathy more. They have fewer comforts. I should not care to give up attending my poor people for the sake of the idle rich. The set phraseology of the country rectory recurred to Lady Meadowcroft. Our poorer brethren and so forth. Oh, of course, she answered with the mechanical acquiescence such women always give to moral platitudes. One must do one's best for the poor, I know, for conscience' sake and all that. It's our duty, and we all try hard to do it. But they're so terribly ungrateful. Don't you think so? Do you know, Miss Wade, in my father's parish Hilda cut her short with a sunny smile, half contemptuous toleration, half genuine pity. We are all ungrateful, she said, but the poor, I think, the least so. I'm sure the gratitude I've often had from my poor women at St. Nathaniel's has made me sometimes feel really ashamed of myself. I had done so little, and they thanked me so much for it. Which only shows, Lady Meadowcroft broke in, that one ought always to have a lady to nurse one. Ça marche, Hilda said to me with a quiet smile a few minutes after, when her ladyship had disappeared in her fluffy robe down the companion ladder. Yes, ça marche, I answered. In an hour or two you will have succeeded in landing your chaperon. And what is most amusing, landed her too, Hilda, just by being yourself, letting her see frankly the actual truth of what you think and feel about her and about everyone. I could not do otherwise, Hilda answered, growing grave. I must be myself or die for it. My method of angling consists in showing myself just as I am. You call me an actress, but I am not really one. I'm only a woman who can use her personality for her own purposes. If I go with Lady Meadowcroft, it will be a mutual advantage. I shall really sympathize with her, for I can see the poor thing is devoured with nervousness. But do you think you will be able to stand her? I asked. Oh dear, yes. She's not a bad little thing, or fond, when you get to know her. It is society that has spoilt her. She would have made a nice, helpful, motherly body if she'd married the curate. As we neared Bombay, conversation grew gradually more and more Indian. It always does under similar circumstances. A sea voyage is half retrospect, half prospect. It has no personal identity. You leave Liverpool for New York at the English standpoint, and are full of what you did in London or Manchester. Halfway over, you begin to discuss American custom houses and New York hotels. By the time you reach Sandy Hook, the talk is all of quick trains west and the shortest route from Philadelphia to New Orleans. You grow by slow stages into the new attitude. At Malta, you are still regretting Europe. After Aden, your mind dwells most on the higher punkah wallas and the proverbial toughness of the duck bungalow chicken. How's the plague at Bombay now? An inquisitive passenger inquired of the captain at dinner our last night out. Getting any better? Lady Meadowcroft's thumb dived between her fingers again. What, is there plague in Bombay? She asked innocently in her nervous fashion. Plague in Bombay? the captain burst out, his burly voice resounding down the saloon. Why, bless your soul, ma'am, where else would you expect it? Plague in Bombay. It's been there these 5 years. Better? Not quite. Going ahead like mad. They're dying by thousands. A microbe, I believe, Dr. Boyle, the inquisitive passenger observed deferentially, with due respect for medical science. Yes, the ship's doctor answered, helping himself to an olive. 40 million microbes to each square inch of the Bombay atmosphere. And we are going to Bombay? Lady Meadowcroft exclaimed aghast. You must have known there was plague there, my dear, Sir Ivor put in soothingly, with a deprecating glance. It's been in all the papers, but only the natives get it. The thumb uncovered itself a little. Oh, only the natives, Lady Meadowcroft echoed, relieved, as if a few thousand Hindus more or less would hardly be missed among the blessings of British rule in India. You know, Ivor, I never read those dreadful things in the papers. I read the society news and our social diary, and columns that are headed mainly about people. I don't care for anything but the Morning Post and the World and Truth. I hate horrors. But it's a blessing to think it's only the natives. Plenty of Europeans, too, bless your heart, the captain thundered out unfeelingly. Why, last time I was in port a nurse died at the hospital. Oh, only a nurse, Lady Meadowcroft began, and then coloured up deeply with a side glance at Hilda. And lots beside nurses, the captain continued, positively delighted at the terror he was inspiring. Pukka Englishmen and Englishwomen. Bad business, this plague, Dr. Cumberledge. Catches particularly those who are most afraid of it. But it's only in Bombay, Lady Meadowcroft cried, clutching at the last straw. I could see she was registering a mental determination to go straight up country the moment she landed. Not a bit of it, the captain answered with provoking cheerfulness. Rampaging about like a roaring lion all over India. Lady Meadowcroft's thumb must have suffered severely. The nails dug into it as if it were someone else's. Half an hour later, as we were on deck in the cool of the evening, the thing was settled. My wife, Sir Ivor said, coming up to us with a serious face, has delivered her ultimatum, positively her ultimatum. I've had a mortal trouble with her, and now she's settled. Either she goes back from Bombay by the return steamer, or else you and Miss Wade must name your own terms to accompany us on our tour in case of emergencies. He glanced wistfully at Hilda. Do you think you can help us? Hilda made no hypocritical pretence of hanging back. Her nature was transparent. If you wish it, yes, she answered, shaking hands upon the bargain. I only want to go about and see India. I can see it quite as well with Lady Meadowcroft as without her, and even better. It is unpleasant for a woman to travel unattached. I require a chaperon, and I am glad to find one. I will join your party, paying my own hotel and traveling expenses, and considering myself as engaged in case your wife should need my services. For that you can pay me, if you like, some nominal retaining fee, £5 or anything. The money is immaterial to me. I like to be useful, and I sympathize with nerves. But it may make your wife feel she is really keeping a hold over me if we put the arrangement on a business basis. As a matter of fact, whatever sum she chooses to pay, I shall hand it over at once to the Bombay Plague Hospital." Sir Ivor looked relieved. "Thank you ever so much," he said, wringing her hand warmly. "I thought you were a brick, and now I know it. My wife says your face inspires confidence, and your voice sympathy. She must have you with her. And you, Dr. Cumberledge?" "I follow Miss Wade's lead," I answered in my most solemn tone, with an impressive bow. "I too am travelling for instruction and amusement only, and if it would give Lady Meadowcroft a greater sense of security to have a duly qualified practitioner in her suite, I shall be glad, on the same terms, to swell your party. I will pay my own way, and I will allow you to name any nominal sum you please for your claim on my medical attendance, if necessary. I hope and believe, however, that our presence will so far reassure our prospective patient as to make our post in both cases a sinecure." 3 minutes later, Lady Meadowcroft rushed on deck and flung her arms impulsively round Hilda. "You dear good girl!" she cried. "How sweet and kind of you! I really couldn't have landed if you hadn't promised to come with us. And Dr. Cumberledge, too. So nice and friendly of you both. But there, it is so much pleasanter to deal with ladies and gentlemen." So Hilda won her point, and what was best, won it fairly. End of chapter 9, part 2. Read by Lars Rolander. Chapter 10, part 1 of Hilda Wade. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Lars Rolander. Hilda Wade, A Woman with Tenacity of Purpose by Grant Allen. Chapter 10, Part 1. The episode of the guide who knew the country. We toured all round India with the Meadowcrofts, and really the lady who was so very exclusive turned out not a bad little thing, when once one has succeeded in breaking through the ring fence with which she surrounded herself. She had an endless, quenchless restlessness, it is true. Her eyes wandered aimlessly. She never was happy for 2 minutes together, unless she was surrounded by friends and was seeing something. What she saw did not interest her much. Certainly her tastes were on the level with those of a very young child. An odd-looking house, a queerly dressed man, a tree cut into shape to look like a peacock, delighted her far more than the most glorious view of the quaintest old temple. Still she must be seeing. She could no more sit still than a fidgeted child or a monkey at the zoo. To be up and doing was her nature, doing nothing to be sure, but still doing it strenuously. So we went the regulation round of Delhi and Agra, the Taj Mahal and the Ghats at Benares, at railroad speed, fulfilling the whole duty of the modern globe-trotter. Lady Meadowcroft looked at everything for 10 minutes at a stretch. Then she wanted to be off, to visit the next thing set down for her in her guidebook. As we left each town, she murmured mechanically, "Well, we've seen that, thank heaven," and straightway went on with equal eagerness and equal boredom to see the one after it. The only thing that did not bore her, indeed, was Hilda's bright talk. "Oh, Miss Wade," she would say, clasping her hands and looking up into Hilda's eyes with her own empty blue ones, "you are so funny, so original, don't you know? You never talk or think of anything like other people. I can't imagine how such ideas come up in your mind. If I were to try all day, I'm sure I should never hit upon them," which was so perfectly true as to be a trifle obvious. Sir Ivor, not being interested in temples but in steel rails, had gone on at once to his concession, or contract, or whatever else it was, on the northeast frontier, leaving his wife to follow and rejoin him in the Himalayas as soon as she had exhausted the sights of India. So, after a few dusty weeks of wear and tear on the Indian railways, we met him once more in the recesses of Nepal, where he was busy constructing a light local line for the reigning Maharajah. If Lady Meadowcroft had been bored at Allahabad and Ajmer, she was immensely more bored in a rough bungalow among the track's depths of the Himalayan valleys. To anybody with eyes in his head, indeed, Toulouse, where Sir Ivor had pitched his headquarters, was lovely enough to keep one interested for a 12-month. Snow-clad needles of rock hemmed it in on either side. Great deodars rose like huge tapers on the hillsides. The plants and flowers were a joy to look at. But Lady Meadowcroft did not care for flowers which one could not wear in one's hair. And what was the good of dressing here, with no one but Ivor and Dr. Cumberledge to see one? She yawned till she was tired. Then she began to grow peevish. "Why ever would you want to build a railway at all in this stupid, silly place?" she said, as we sat in the veranda in the cool evening. "I'm sure I can't imagine. We must go somewhere. This is maddening, maddening. Miss Wade, Dr. Cumberledge, I count upon you to discover something for me to do. If I vegetate like this, seeing nothing all day long but those eternal hills," she clenched her little fist, "I shall go mad with ennui." Hilda had a happy thought. "I have a fancy to see some of these Buddhist monasteries," she said, smiling as one smiles at a tiresome child whom one likes in spite of everything. "You remember I was reading that book of Mr. Simpson's on the steamer coming out, a curious book about the Buddhist praying wheels, and it made me want to see one of their temples immensely. What do you say to camping out a few weeks in the hills? It would be an adventure at any rate." "Camping out!" Lady Meadowcroft exclaimed, half roused from her languor by the idea of a change. "Oh, do you think that would be fun? Should we sleep on the ground? But wouldn't it be dreadfully, horribly uncomfortable?" "Not half so uncomfortable as you'll find yourself here at Toulouse in a few days, Emmy," her husband put in grimly. "The rains will soon be on, lass, and when the rains are on, by all account they're precious heavy hereabouts. Rare fine rains, so that a man's half flooded out of his bed o' nights, which won't suit you, my lady." The poor little woman clasped her twitching hands in feeble agony. "Oh, Ivor, how dreadful! Is it what they call the mongoose or monsoon or something? But if they're so bad here, surely they'll be worse in the hills, and camping out too, won't they?" "Not if you go the right way to work. I'm told it never rains the other side of the hills. The mountains stop the clouds, and once you're over you're safe enough. Only you must take care to keep well in the Maharaja's territory. Cross the frontier to the other side into Tibet, and they'll skin thee alive as soon as look at thee. They don't like strangers in Tibet, prejudiced against them somehow. They pretty well skinned that young chap Lander who tried to go there a year ago." "But Ivor, I don't want to be skinned alive. I'm not an eel, please." "That's all right, lass. Leave that to me. I can get thee a guide, a man that's very well acquainted with the mountains. I was talking to a scientific explorer here the other day, and he knows of a good guide who can take you anywhere. He'll get you the chance of seeing the inside of a Buddhist monastery if you like, Miss Wade. He's hand in glove with all the religion they've got in this part of the country. They've got no one much, but at what there is, he's a rare devout one." We discussed the matter fully for 2 or 3 days before we made up our minds. Lady Meadowcroft was undecided between her hatred of dullness and her haunting fear that scorpions and snakes would intrude upon our tents and beds while we were camping. In the end, however, the desire for change carried the day. She decided to dodge the rainy season by getting behind the Himalayan passes, in the dry region to the north of the great range, where rain seldom falls, the country being watered only by the melting of the snows on the high summits. This decision delighted Hilda, who since she came to India had fallen a prey to the fashionable vice of amateur photography. She took to it enthusiastically. She had bought herself a first-rate camera of the latest scientific pattern at Bombay, and ever since had spent all her time and spoiled her pretty hands in developing. She was also seized with a craze for Buddhism. The objects that everywhere particularly attracted her were the old Buddhist temples and tombs and sculptures with which India is studded. Of these she had taken some hundreds of views, all printed by herself with the greatest care and precision. But in India, after all, Buddhism is a dead creed. Its monuments alone remain. She was anxious to see the Buddhist religion in its living state, and that she could only do in these remote outlying Himalayan valleys. Our outfit therefore included a dark tent for Hilda's photographic apparatus, a couple of roomy tents to live and sleep in, a small cooking stove, a cook to look after it, half a dozen bearers, and the highly recommended guide who knew his way about the country. In 3 days we were ready, to Sir Ivor's great delight. He was fond of his pretty wife, and proud of her, I believe, but when once she was away from the whirl and bustle of the London that she loved, it was a relief to him, I fancy, to pursue his work alone, unhampered by her restless and querulous childishness. On the morning when we were to make our start, the guide, who was well acquainted with the mountains, turned up, as villainous looking a person as I have ever set eyes on. He was sullen and furtive. I judged him at sight to be half Hindu, half Tibetan. He had a dark complexion between brown and tawny, narrow slant eyes, very small and beady black, with a cunning leer in their oblique corners, a flat nose much broadened at the wings, a cruel, thick, sensuous mouth, and high cheekbones, the whole surmounted by a comprehensive scowl and an abundant crop of lank black hair, tied up in a knot at the nape of the neck with a yellow ribbon. His face was shifty, his short, stout form looked well adapted to mountain climbing, and also to wriggling. A deep scar on his left cheek did not help to inspire confidence, but he was polite and civil spoken, altogether a clever, unscrupulous, wide awake soul, who would serve you well if he thought he could make by it, and would betray you at a pinch to the highest bidder. We set out in merry mood, prepared to solve all the abstruse problems of the Buddhist religion. Our spoiled child stood the camping out better than I expected. She was fretful, of course, and worried about trifles. She missed her maid and her accustomed comforts, but she minded the roughing it less, on the whole, than she had minded the boredom of inaction in the bungalow, and being cast on Hilda and myself for resources, she suddenly evolved an unexpected taste for producing, developing, and printing photographs. We took dozens, as we went along, of little villages on our route, wood-built villages with quaint houses and turrets, and as Hilda had brought her collection of prints with her for comparison of the Indian and Nepalese monuments, we spent the evenings after our short day's march each day in arranging and collating them. We had planned to be away 6 weeks at least. In that time the monsoon would have burst and passed. Our guide thought we might see all that was worth seeing of the Buddhist monasteries, and Sir Ivor thought we should have fairly escaped the dreaded wet season. "What do you make of our guide?" I asked Hilda on our fourth day out. I began somehow to distrust him. "Oh, he seems all right," Hilda answered carelessly, and her voice reassured me. "He's a rouge, of course. All guides and interpreters and dragomans and the like, in out of the way places, always are rouges. If they were honest men they would share the ordinary prejudice of their countrymen, and would have nothing to do with the hated stranger. But in this case our friend Ramdass has no end to gain by getting us into mischief. If he had, he wouldn't scruple for a second to cut our throats. But then there are too many of us. He will probably try to cheat us by making preposterous charges when he gets us back to Tulu, but that's Lady Meadowcraft's business. I don't doubt Sir Ivor will be more than a match for him there. I'll back one shrewd Yorkshireman against any 3 Tibetan half-castes any day." "You're right that he would cut our throats if it served his purpose," I answered. "His servile and servility goes hand in hand with treachery. The more I watch him, the more I see scoundrel written in large type on every bend of the fellow's oily shoulders." "Oh, yes, he's a bad lot, I know. The cook, who can speak a little English and a little Tibetan as well as Hindustani, tells me Ram Dass has the worst reputation of any man in the mountains. but he says he's a very good guide to the passes for all that, and if he's well paid, will do what he's paid for." Next day but one we approached at last, after several short marches, the neighborhood of what our guide assured us was a Buddhist monastery. I was glad when he told us of it, giving the place the name of a well-known Nepalese village. For, to say the truth, I was beginning to get frightened. Judging by the sun, for I had brought no compass, it struck me that we seemed to have been marching almost due north ever since we left Tulu, and I fancied such a line of march must have brought us by this time suspiciously near the Tibetan frontier. Now I had no desire to be skinned alive, as Sir Ivor put it. I did not wish to emulate Saint Bartholomew and others of the early Christian martyrs, so I was pleased to learn that we were really drawing near Kulak, the first of the Nepalese Buddhist monasteries to which our well-informed guide, himself a Buddhist, had promised to introduce us. We were tramping up a beautiful high mountain valley, closed round on every side by snowy peaks. A brawling river ran over a rocky bed in cataracts down its midst. Crags rose abruptly a little in front of us. Half way up the slope to the left, on a ledge of rock, rose a long, low building with curious pyramid-like roofs, crowned at either end by a sort of minaret, which resembled more than anything else a huge earthenware oil jar. This was the monastery or lamasery we had come so far to see. Honestly, at first sight, I did not feel sure it was worth the trouble. Our guide called a halt and turned to us with a sudden peremptory air. His servility had vanished. "You stoppy here," he said slowly in broken English, "while me a go on to see whether Lama Sahib's ready to take you. Must ask leave from Lama Sahib's to visit village. If no ask leave," he drew his hand across his throat with a significant gesture, "Lama Sahib's cutty head of European." "Goodness gracious!" Lady Meadowcroft cried, clinging tight to Hilda. "Miss Wade, this is dreadful! Where on earth have you brought us to?" "Oh, that's all right," Hilda answered, trying to soothe her, though she herself began to look a trifle anxious. "That's only Ram Dass's graphic way of putting things." We sat down on a bank of trailing club moss by the side of the rough track, for it was nothing more, and let our guide go on to negotiate with the lamas. "Well, tonight anyhow," I exclaimed, looking up, "we shall sleep on our own mattresses, with a roof over our heads. These monks will find us quarters. That's always something." We got out our basket and made tea. In all moments of doubt, your Englishwoman makes tea. As Hilda said, she will boil her Etna on Vesuvius. We waited and drank our tea. We drank our tea and waited. A full hour passed away. Ram Dass never came back. I began to get frightened. At last something stirred. A group of excited men in yellow robes issued forth from the monastery, wound their way down the hill, and approached us shouting. They gesticulated as they came. I could see they looked angry. All at once Hilda clutched my arm. "Hubert," she cried in an undertone, "we are betrayed. I see it all now. These are Tibetans, not Nepalese." She paused a second, then went on. "I see it all. Our guide Ram Dass, he had a reason after all for getting us into mischief. Sebastian must have tracked us. He was bribed by Sebastian. It was he who recommended Ram Dass to Sir Ivor." "Why do you think so?" I asked low. "Because, look for yourself. These men who come are dressed in yellow. That means Tibetans. Red is the color of the lamas in Nepal, yellow in Tibet and all other Buddhist countries. I read it in the book, the Buddhist praying wheel, you know. These are Tibetan fanatics, and as Ram Dass said, they will probably cut our throats for us." I was thankful that Hilda's marvelous memory gave us even that moment for preparation and facing the difficulty. I saw in a flash that she was quite right. We had been inveigled across the frontier. These Mutis were Tibetans, Buddhist inquisitors, enemies. Tibet is the most jealous country on earth. It allows no stranger to intrude upon its borders. I had to meet the worst. I stood there, a single white man armed only with one revolver, answerable for the lives of two English ladies, and accompanied by a cringing outcast Gurkha cook and half a dozen doubtful Nepalese bearers. To fly was impossible. We were fairly trapped. There was nothing for it but to wait and put a bold face on our utter helplessness. I turned to our spoiled child. "Lady Meadowcroft," I said very seriously, "this is danger, real danger. Now listen to me. You must do as you are bid. No crying, no cowardice. Your life and ours depend upon it. We must none of us give way. We must pretend to be brave. Show one sign of fear, and these people will probably cut our throats on the spot here." To my immense surprise, Lady Meadowcroft rose to the height of the situation. "Oh, as long as it isn't disease," she answered resignedly, "I'm not much afraid of anything. I should mind the plague a great deal more than I mind a set of howling savages." By that time the men in yellow robes had almost come up to us. It was clear they were boiling over with indignation, but they still did everything decently and in order. One who was dressed in finer vestments than the rest, a portly person with the fat, greasy cheeks and drooping flesh of a celibate church dignitary, whom I therefore judged to be the abbot or chief lama of the monastery, gave orders to his subordinates in a language which we did not understand. His men obeyed him. In a second they had closed us round as in a ring or cordon. Then the chief lama stepped forward with an authoritative air, like Pooh Bah in the play, and said something in the same tongue to the cook, who spoke a little Tibetan. It was obvious from his manner that Ram Dass had told them all about us, for the lama selected the cook as interpreter at once, without taking any notice of myself, the ostensible head of the petty expedition. "What does he say?" I asked as soon as he had finished speaking. The cook, who had been salaaming all the time, at the risk of a broken back, in his most utterly abject and grovelling attitude, made answer tremulously in his broken English: "This is priest Sahib of the temple. He very angry because why European Sahib in Mem Sahibs come into Tibet land. No European, no Hindu must come into Tibet land. Priest Sahib say cut all European throats. Let Nepal man go back like him come to him own country." I looked as if the message were purely indifferent to me. "Tell him," I said, smiling, though at some little effort, "we were not trying to enter Tibet. Our rascally guide misled us. We were going to Kulak in the Maharajah's territory. We will turn back quietly to the Maharajah's land if the priest Sahibid will allow us to camp out for the night here." I glanced at Hilda and Lady Meadowcroft. I must say their bearing under these trying circumstances was thoroughly worthy of two English ladies. They stood erect, looking as all Tibet might come, and they would smile at it scornfully. The cook interpreted my remarks as well as he was able, his Tibetan being probably about equal in quality to his English. But the chief lama made a reply which I could see for myself was by no means friendly. "What is his answer?" I asked the cook in my haughtiest voice. I am haughty with difficulty. Our interpreter salaamed once more, shaking in his shoes if he wore any. "Priest Sahib say that all lies, that all damn lies. You is European missionary very bad man. You want to go to Lhasa, but no white Sahib must go to Lhasa. Holy city Lhasa for Buddhists only. This is not the way to Kulak. This is not Maharaja's land. This place belong a Dalai Lama. Head of all lamas, have house at Lhasa. But priest Sahib know you European missionary want to go to Lhasa, convert Buddhists because Ram Dass tell him so." "Ram Dass!" I exclaimed, thoroughly angry by this time. "The rouge, the scoundrel! He has not only deserted us, but betrayed us as well. He has told this lie on purpose to set the Tibetans against us. We must face the worst now. Our one chance is to cajole these people." The fat priest spoke again. "What does he say this time?" I asked. "He say Ram Dass tell him all this because Ram Dass good man, very good man. Ram Dass converted Buddhist. You pay Ram Dass to guide you to Lhasa, but Ram Dass good man not want to let European see holy city. Bring you here instead, then tell priest Sahib about it." And he chuckled inwardly. "What will they do to us?" Lady Meadowcroft asked, her face very white, though her manner was more courageous than I could easily have believed of her. "I don't know," I answered, biting my lip, "but we must not give way. We must put a bold face upon it. Their bark after all may be worse than their bite. We may still persuade them to let us go back again." The men in yellow robes motioned us to move on towards the village and monastery. We were their prisoners, and it was useless to resist. So I ordered the bearers to take up the tents and baggage. Lady Meadowcroft resigned herself to the inevitable. We mounted the path in a long line, the lamas in yellow closely guarding our draggled little procession. I tried my best to preserve my composure, and above all else not to look dejected. As we approached the village, with its squalid and fetid huts, we caught the sound of bells, innumerable bells, tinkling at regular intervals. Many people trooped out from their houses to look at us, all flat-faced, all with oblique eyes, all stolidly, sullenly, stupidly passive. They seemed curious as to our dress and appearance, but not apparently hostile. We walked on to the low line of the monastery, with its pyramidal roof and its queer flower vase minarets. After a moment's discussion, they ushered us into the temple or chapel, which was evidently also their communal council room and place of deliberation. We entered trembling. We had no great certainty that we would ever get out of it alive again. End of chapter 10, part 1. Read by Lars Rolander. Chapter 10, Part 2 of Hilda Wade. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Lars Rolander. Hilda Wade, A Woman with Tenacity of Purpose by Grant Allen. Chapter 10, Part 2. The temple was a large oblong hall, with a great figure of Buddha, cross-legged, imperturbable, enthroned in a niche at its further end, like the apse or recess in a church in Italy. Before it stood an altar. The Buddha sat and smiled on us with his eternal smile, a complacent deity carved out of white stone and gaudily painted. A yellow robe, like the Lama's, dangled across his shoulders. The air seemed close with incense, and also with bad ventilation. The center of the nave, if I may so call it, was occupied by a huge wooden cylinder, a sort of overgrown drum, painted in bright colors, with ornamental designs and Tibetan letters. It was much taller than a man, some 9 feet high, I should say, and it revolved above and below on an iron spindle. Looking closer, I saw it had a crank attached to it, with a string tied to the crank. A solitary monk, absorbed in his devotions, was pulling this string as we entered, and making the cylinder revolve with a jerk as he pulled it. At each revolution a bell above rang once. The monk seemed as if his whole soul was bound up in the huge revolving drum, and the bell worked by it. We took this all in at a glance, somewhat vaguely at first, for our lives were at stake, and we were scarcely in a mood for ethnological observations. But the moment Hilda saw the cylinder, her eye lighted up. I could see at once an idea had struck her. "This is a praying wheel," she cried in quite a delighted voice. "I know where I am now, Hubert. Lady Meadowcroft, I see a way out of this. Do exactly as you see me do, And all may yet go well. Don't show surprise at anything. I think we can work upon these people's religious feelings. Without a moment's hesitation, she prostrated herself thrice on the ground before the figure of Buddha, knocking her head ostentatiously in the dust as she did so. We followed suit instantly. Then Hilda rose and began walking slowly round the big drum in the nave, saying aloud at each step, in a sort of monotonous chant, like a priest intoning the four mystic words, Aum Mani Padme Hum, Aum Mani Padme Hum, many times over. We repeated the sacred formula after her, as if we had always been brought up to it. I noticed that Hilda walked the way of the sun. It is an important point in all these mysterious half magical ceremonies. At last, after about 10 or 12 such rounds, she paused with an absorbed air of devotion, and knocked her head 3 times on the ground once more, doing puja before the ever smiling Buddha. By this time, however, the lessons of St. Alphege's rectory began to recur to Lady Meadowcroft's mind. "Oh, Miss Wade," she murmured in an awe-struck voice, "ought we to do like this? Isn't it clear idolatry?" Hilda's common sense waved her aside at once. "Idolatry or not, it is the only way to save our lives," she answered in her firmest voice. "But ought we to save our lives? Oughtn't we to be, well, Christian martyrs?" Hilda was patience itself. "I think not, dear," she replied gently but decisively. "You are not called upon to be a martyr. The danger of idolatry is scarcely so great among Europeans of our time that we need feel it a duty to protest with our lives against it. I have better uses to which to put my life myself. I don't mind being a martyr where a sufficient cause demands it, but I don't think such a sacrifice is required of us now in a Tibetan monastery. Life was not given us to waste on gratuitous martyrdoms. But really, I'm afraid—" "Don't be afraid of anything, dear, or you will risk all. Follow my lead. I will answer for your conduct. Surely, if Naaman in the midst of idolaters was permitted to bow down in the house of Rimmon to save his place at court, you may blamelessly bow down to save your life in a Buddhist temple. Now, no more casuistry, but do as I tell you. Aum mani padme hum again. Once more round the drum there." We followed her a second time, Lady Meadowcroft giving in after a feeble protest. The priests in yellow looked on, profoundly impressed by our circumnavigation. It was clear they began to reconsider the question of our nefarious designs on their holy city. After we had finished our second tour round the drum with the utmost solemnity, one of the monks approached Hilda, whom he seemed to take now for an important priestess. He said something to her in Tibetan, which of course we did not understand, but as he pointed at the same time to the brother on the floor who was turning the wheel, Hilda nodded acquiescence. "If you wish it," she said in English, and he appeared to comprehend. "He wants to know whether I would like to take a turn at the cylinder." She knelt down in front of it, before the little stool where the brother in yellow had been kneeling till that moment, and took the string in her hand, as if she were well accustomed to it. I could see that the abbot gave the cylinder a surreptitious push with his left hand before she began, so as to make it revolve in the opposite direction from that in which the monk had just been moving it. This was obviously to try her, but Hilda let the string drop with a little cry of horror. That was the wrong way round, the unlucky, uncanonical direction, the evil way, widdershins, the opposite of sunwise. With an awed air she stopped short, repeated once more the four mystic words or mantra, and bowed thrice with well assumed reverence to the Buddha. Then she set the cylinder turning of her own accord with her right hand, in the propitious direction, and sent it round 7 times with the utmost gravity. At this point, encouraged by Hilda's example, I too became possessed of a brilliant inspiration. I opened my purse and took out of it 4 brand new silver rupees of the Indian coinage. They were very handsome and shiny coins, each impressed with an excellent design of the head of the Queen as Empress of India. Holding them up before me, I approached the Buddha and laid the 4 in a row submissively at his feet, uttering at the same time an appropriate formula. But as I did not know the proper mantra for use upon such an occasion, I supplied one from memory, saying in a hushed voice, "Hokey pokey winky wum," as I laid each one before the benignly smiling statue. I have no doubt from their faces the priests imagined I was uttering a most powerful spell or prayer in my own language. As soon as I retreated with my face towards the image, the Chief Lama glided up and examined the coins carefully. It was clear he had never seen anything of the sort before, for he gazed at them for some minutes, and then showed them round to his monks with an air of deep reverence. I do not doubt he took the image of her gracious majesty for a very mighty and potent goddess. As soon as all had inspected them, with many cries of admiration, he opened a little secret drawer of relic holder in the pedestal of the statue, and deposited them in it with a muttered prayer, as precious offerings from the European Buddhist. By this time we could easily see we were beginning to produce a most favorable impression. Hilda's study of Buddhism had stood us in good stead. The Chief Lama or Abbot motioned to us to be seated, in a much politer mood, after which he and his principal monks held a long and animated conversation together. I gathered from their looks and gestures that the head Lama inclined to regard us as orthodox Buddhists, but that some of his followers had grave doubts of their own as to the depth and reality of our religious convictions. While they debated and hesitated, Hilda had another splendid idea. She undid her portfolio and took out of it the photographs of ancient Buddhist tombs and temples which she had taken in India. These she produced triumphantly. At once the priests and monks crowded round us to look at them. In a moment, when they recognized the meaning of the pictures, their excitement grew quite intense. The photographs were passed round from hand to hand amid loud exclamations of joy and surprise. One brother would point out with astonishment to another some familiar symbol or some ancient text. 2 or 3 of them, in their devout enthusiasm, fell down on their knees and kissed the pictures. We had played a trump card. The monks could see for themselves by this time that we were deeply interested in Buddhism. Now, minds of that calibre never understand a disinterested interest. The moment they saw we were collectors of Buddhist pictures, they jumped at once to the conclusion that we must also, of course, be devout believers. So far did they carry their sense of fraternity, indeed, that they insisted upon embracing us. That was a hard trial to Lady Meadowcroft, for the brethren were not conspicuous for personal cleanliness. She suspected germs, and she dreaded typhoid far more than she dreaded the Tibetan cutthroat. The brethren asked, through the medium of our interpreter the cook, where these pictures had been made. We explained as well as we could by means of the same mouthpiece, a very earthen vessel, that they came from ancient Buddhist buildings in India. This delighted them still more, though I know not in what form our Gorkha retainer may have conveyed the information. At any rate, they insisted on embracing us again, after which the Chief Lama said something very solemnly to our amateur interpreter. The cook interpreted. "Priest Sahib say, he too got very sacred thing, come from India, sacred Buddhist puja thing, go to show it to you." We waited breathless. The Chief Lama approached the altar before the recess, in front of the great cross-legged, vapidly smiling Buddha. He bowed himself to the ground 3 times over, as well as his portly frame would permit him, knocking his forehead against the floor, just as Hilda had done. Then he proceeded, almost awestruck, to take from the altar an object wrapped round with gold brocade, and very carefully guarded. 2 acolytes accompanied him in the most reverent way. he slowly unwound the folds of gold cloth and released from its hiding place the highly sacred deposit. He held it up before our eyes with an air of triumph. It was an English bottle! The label on it shone with gold and bright colors. I could see it was figured. The figure represented a cat squatting on its haunches. The sacred inscription ran in our own tongue, Old Tom Gin, unsweetened. The monks bowed their heads in profound silence as the sacred thing was produced. I caught Hilda's eyes. "For heaven's sake," I murmured low, "don't either of you laugh. If you do, it's all up with us." They kept their countenances with admirable decorum. Another idea struck me. "Tell them," I said to the cook, "that we too have a similar and very powerful god, but much more lively." He interpreted my words to them. Then I opened our stores and drew out with a flourish our last remaining bottle of Simla soda water. Very solemnly and seriously I unwired the cork, as if performing an almost sacrosanct ceremony. The monks crowded round with the deepest curiosity. I held the cork down for a second with my thumb while I uttered once more in my most awesome tone the mystic words "Hokey pokey winky wum." Then I let it fly suddenly. The soda water was well up. The cork bounded to the ceiling. The contents of the bottle spurted out of the place in the most impressive fashion. For a minute the llamas drew back alarmed. The thing seemed almost devilish. Then, slowly reassured by our composure, they crept back and looked. With a glance of inquiry at the abbot, I took out my pocket corkscrew and drew the cork of the gin bottle, which had never been opened. I signed for a cup. They brought me one, reverently. I poured out a little gin, to which I added some soda water, and drank first of it myself, to show them it was not poison. After that I handed it to the chief Lama, who sipped at it, sipped again, and emptied the cup at the third trial. Evidently the sacred drink was very much to his taste, for he smacked his lips after it, and turned with exclamations of surprised delight to his inquisitive companions. The rest of the soda water, duly mixed with gin, soon went the round of the expectant monks. It was greatly approved of. Unhappily, there was not quite enough soda water to supply a drink for all of them, but those who tasted it were deeply impressed. I could see that they took the bite of carbonic acid gas for evidence of a most powerful and present deity. That settled our position. We were instantly regarded not only as Buddhists, but as mighty magicians from a far country. The monks made haste to show us rooms destined for our use in the monastery. They were not unbearably filthy, and we had our own bedding. We had to spend the night there, that was certain. We had at least escaped the worst and most pressing danger. I may add that I believe our cook to have been a most arrant liar, which was a lucky circumstance. Once the wretched creature saw the tide turn, I have reason to infer that he supported our cause by telling the chief Lama the most incredible stories about our holiness and power. At any rate, it is certain that we were regarded with the utmost respect, and treated thenceforth with the affectionate deference due to acknowledged and certified sainthood. It began to strike us now, however, that we had almost overshot the mark in this matter of sanctity. We had made ourselves quite too holy. The monks, who were eager at first to cut our throats, thought so much of us now that we grew a little anxious as to whether they would not wish to keep such devout souls in their midst for ever. As a matter of fact, we spent a whole week against our wills in the monastery, being very well fed and treated meanwhile, yet virtually captives. It was the camera that did it. The lamas had never seen any photographs before. They asked how these miraculous pictures were produced, and Hilda, to keep up the good impression, showed them how she operated. When a full-length portrait of the chief Lama in his sacrificial robes was actually printed off and exhibited before their eyes, their delight knew no bounds. The picture was handed about among the astonished brethren, and received with loud shouts of joy and wonder. Nothing would satisfy them then but that we must photograph every individual monk in the place. Even the Buddha himself, cross-legged and imperturbable, had to sit for his portrait, as he was used to sitting. Never, indeed, having done anything else, he came out admirably. Day after day passed, suns rose and suns set, and it was clear that the monks did not mean to let us leave their precincts in a hurry. Lady Meadowcroft, having recovered by this time from her first fright, began to grow bored. The Buddhist ritual ceased to interest her. To vary the monotony, I hit upon an expedient for killing time till our two pressing hosts saw fit to let us depart. They were fond of religious processions of the most protracted sort, dances before the altar, with animal masks or heads, and other weird ceremonial orgies. Hilda, who had read herself up in Buddhist ideas, assured me that all these things were done in order to heap up karma. What is karma? I asked listlessly. Karma is good works or merit. The more praying wheels you turn, the more bells you ring, the greater the merit. One of the monks is always at work turning the big wheel that moves the bell, so as to heap up merit night and day for the monastery. This set me thinking. I soon discovered that, no matter how the wheel is turned, the karma or merit is equal. It is the turning it that counts, not the personal exertion. There were wheels and bells in convenient situations all over the village, and whoever passed one gave it a twist as he went by, thus piling up karma for all the inhabitants. Reflecting upon these facts, I was seized with an idea. I got Hilda to take instantaneous photographs of all the monks during a sacred procession, at rapid intervals. In that sunny climate we had no difficulty at all in printing off from the plates as soon as developed. Then I took a small wheel about the size of an oyster barrel, the monks had dozens of them, and pasted the photographs inside in successive order, like what is called a zoetrope, or wheel of life, by cutting holes in the side and arranging a mirror from Lady Meadowcroft's dressing bag. I completed my machine so that when it was turned round rapidly, one saw the procession actually taking place, as if the figures were moving. The thing, in short, made a living picture like a cinematograph. A mountain stream ran past the monastery and supplied it with water. I had a second inspiration. I was always mechanical. I fixed a water wheel in the stream where it made a petty cataract, and connected it by means of a small crank with a barrel of photographs. My zoetrope thus worked of itself and piled up karma for all the village, whether anyone happened to be looking at it or not. The monks, who were really excellent fellows when not engaged in cutting throats in the interest of the faith, regarded this device as a great and glorious religious invention. They went down on their knees to it, and were profoundly respectful. They also bowed to me so deeply when I first exhibited it, that I began to be puffed up with spiritual pride. Lady Meadowcroft recalled me to my better self by murmuring with a sigh, "I suppose we really can't draw a line now, but it does seem to me like encouraging idolatry." "Purely mechanical encouragement," I answered, gazing at my handicraft with an inventor's pardonable pride. "You see, it is the turning itself that does good, not any prayers attached to it. I divert the idolatry from human worshippers to an unconscious stream, which must surely be meritorious." Then I thought of the mystic sentence, Aum mani padme hum. "What a pity it is," I cried, "I couldn't make them a phonograph to repeat their mantra. If I could, they might fulfill all their religious duties together by machinery." Hilda reflected a second. "There is a great future," she said at last, "for the man who first introduces smoke jacks into Tibet. Every household will buy one, as an automatic means of acquiring karma." "Don't publish that idea in England," I exclaimed hastily, "if ever we get there. As sure as you do, somebody will see in it an opening for British trade, and we shall spend 20 millions on conquering Tibet in the interests of civilization and a smoke jack syndicate." How long we might have stopped at the monastery I cannot say, had it not been for the intervention of an unexpected episode which occurred just a week after our first arrival. We were comfortable enough in a rough way, with our Gorkha cook to prepare our food for us, and our bearers to wait, but to the end I never felt quite sure of our hosts, who after all were entertaining us under false pretenses. We had told them truly enough that Buddhist missionaries had now penetrated to England, and though they had not the slightest conception where England might be, and knew not the name of Madame Blavatsky, this news interested them. Regarding us as promising neophytes, they were anxious now that we should go on to Lhasa, in order to receive full instruction in the faith from the chief fountainhead, the Grand Lama in person. To this we demurred. Mr. Lander's experiences did not encourage us to follow his lead. The monks, for their part, could not understand our reluctance. They thought that every well-intentioned convert must wish to make the pilgrimage to Lhasa, the Mecca of their creed. Our hesitation threw some doubt on the reality of our conversion. A proselyte, above all men, should never be lukewarm. They expected us to embrace the opportunity with fervour. We might be massacred on the way, to be sure, but what did that matter? We should be dying for the faith, and ought to be charmed at so splendid a prospect. On the day week after our arrival time, Chief Lama came to me at nightfall. His face was serious. He spoke to me through our accredited interpreter, the cook. Priest Sahib say very important. The Sahib and Mem Sahibs must go away from here before sun get up tomorrow morning. Why so? I asked, as astonished as I was pleased. Priest Sahib say he like you very much. Oh, very, very much. No want to see village people kill you. Kill us? But I thought they believed we were saints. Priest say that just it. Too much saint altogether. People hear about all telling that the Sahib and the Mem Sahibs very great saints. Much holy like Buddha. Make picture, work miracles. People think if them kill you and have your tomb here, very holy place, very great karma. Very good for trade. Plenty Tibetan man hear you holy men come here on pilgrimage. Pilgrimage make fair, make market, very good for village. So people want to kill you, build shrine over your body. This was a view of the advantages of sanctity, which had never before struck me. Now I had not been eager even for the distinction of being a Christian martyr. As to being a Buddhist martyr, that was quite out of the question. Then what does the Lama advise us to do? I asked. Priest Sahib say he love you, no want to see village people kill you. He give you guide, very good guide, no mountains well, take you back straight to Maharaja's country. Not Ram Dass? I asked suspiciously. No, not Ram Dass, very good man, Tibetan. I saw at once this was a genuine crisis. All was hastily arranged. I went in and told Hilda and Lady Meadowcroft. Our spoiled child cried a little, of course, at the idea of being enshrined, but on the whole behaved admirably. At early dawn next morning, before the village was awake, we crept with stealthy steps out of the monastery, whose inmates were friendly. Our new guide accompanied us. We avoided the village, on whose outskirts the lamasery lay, and made straight for the valley. By 6 o'clock we were well out of sight of the clustered houses and the pyramidal spires, but I did not breathe freely till late in the afternoon, when we found ourselves once more under British protection in the first hamlet of the Maharaja's territory. As for that scoundrel Ram Dass, we heard nothing more of him. He disappeared into space from the moment he deserted us at the door of the trap into which he had led us. The chief Lama told me he had gone back at once by another route to his own country. End of chapter 10, part 2. Read by Lars Rolander. Chapter 11, part 1 of Hilda Wade. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Lars Rolander. Hilda Wade, A Woman with Tenacity of Purpose by Grant Allen. Chapter 11, Part 1. The episode of the officer who understood perfectly. After our fortunate escape from the clutches of our two admiring Tibetan hosts, we wound our way slowly back through the Maharaja's territory towards Sir Ivor's headquarters. On the third day out from the Lamasery, we camped in a romantic Himalayan valley, a narrow green glen with a brawling stream running in white cataracts and rapids down its midst. We were able to breathe freely now. We could enjoy the great tapering deodars that rose in ranks on the hillsides, the snow-clad needles of ramping rock that bounded the view to north and south, the feathery bamboo jungle that fringed and half obscured the mountain torrent, whose cool music, alas, fallaciously cool, was borne to us through the dense screen of waving foliage. Lady Meadowcroft was so delighted at having got clear away from those murderous and saintly Tibetans that for a while she almost forgot to grumble. She even condescended to admire the deep cleft ravine in which we bivouacked for the night, and to admit that the orchids which hung from the tall trees were as fine as any at her florist's in Piccadilly. Though how they can have got them out here already in this outlandish place, the most fashionable kinds, when we in England have to grow them with such care in expensive hothouses, she said, really passes my comprehension. She seemed to think that orchids originated in Covent Garden. Early next morning I was engaged with one of my native men in lighting the fire to boil our kettle, for in spite of all misfortunes we still made tea with creditable punctuality, when a tall and good-looking Nepalese approached us from the hills with cat-like tread and stood before me in an attitude of profound supplication. He was a well-dressed young man, like a superior native servant. His face was broad and flat, but kindly and good-humored. He salaamed many times, but still said nothing. "Ask him what he wants," I cried, turning to our fair-weather friend the cook. The deferential Nepalese did not wait to be asked. "Salaam, Sahib," he said, bowing again very low till his forehead almost touched the ground. "You are European Doctor Sahib?" "I am," I answered, taken aback at being thus recognized in the forest of Nepal. "But how in wonder did you come to know it?" "You camped near here when you passed this way before, and you doctor little native girl who got sore eyes. All the country here tell you is very great physician. So I come and to see if you will turn aside to my village to help us." "Where did you learn English?" I exclaimed, more and more astonished. "I is servant one time at British residence at the Maharaja's city. Pick up English there. Also pick up plenty loopy. Very good business at British residence. Now gone back home to my own village, retired gentleman." And he drew himself up with conscious dignity. I surveyed the retired gentleman from head to foot. He had an air of distinction which not even his bare toes could altogether mar. He was evidently a person of local importance. "And what did you want me to visit your village for?" I inquired dubiously. "Why, traveller Sahib ill there, sir. Velly ill. Got plague. Great first class Sahib. All same like governor. Ill. Fit to die. Send me out all times to find European doctor." "Plague?" I repeated, startled. He nodded. "Yes, plague. All same like them hab him so bad down Bombay way." "Do you know his name?" I asked, for though one does not like to desert a fellow creature in distress, I did not care to turn aside from my road on such an errand, with Hilda and Lady Meadowcroft, unless for some amply sufficient reason. The retired gentleman shook his head in the most emphatic fashion. "How me know?" he answered, opening the palms of his hands, as if to show he had nothing concealed in them.
Forget European name all time so easily, and traveler Sahib name very hard to remember. Not got English name, him European Follinger.
A European foreigner, I repeated. And you say he is seriously ill? Plague is no trifle. Well, wait a minute. I'll see what the ladies say about it. How far off is your village? He pointed with his hand somewhat vaguely to the hillside.
2 hours walk,
he answered, with the mountaineer's habit of reckoning distance by time, which extends, under the like circumstances, the whole world over. I went back to the tents and consulted Hilda and Lady Meadowcroft. Our spoiled child pouted and was utterly averse to any detour of any sort.
Let's get back straight to Ivor, she said petulantly. I've had enough of camping out. It's all very well in its way for a week, but when they begin to talk about cutting your throat and all that, it ceases to be a joke and becomes a wee bit uncomfortable. I want my feather bed. I object to their villages.
But consider, dear, Hilda said gently, this traveler is ill, all alone in a strange land. How can Hubert desert him? It is a doctor's duty to do what he can to alleviate pain and to cure the sick. What would we have thought ourselves, when we were at the Lamasery, if a body of European travellers had known we were there, imprisoned and in danger of our lives, and had passed by on the other side without attempting to rescue us? Lady Meadowcroft knit her forehead.
That was us,
she said with an impatient nod after a pause.
And this is another person. You can't turn aside for everybody who's ill in all Nepal. And plague, too, so horrid. Besides, how do we know this isn't another plan of these hateful people to lead us into danger?
Lady Meadowcroft is quite right, I said hastily. I never thought about that. There may be no plague, no patient at all. I will go up with this man alone, Hilda, and find out the truth. It will only take me 5 hours at most. By noon I shall be back with you.
What, and leave us here unprotected among the wild beasts and the savages?
Lady Meadowcroft cried, horrified.
In the midst of the forest, Dr. Cumberledge, how can you?
You are not unprotected, I answered, soothing her. You have Hilda with you. She is worth 10 men. And besides, our Nepalese are fairly trustworthy. Hilda bore me out in my resolve. She was too much of a nurse, and had imbibed too much of the true medical sentiment, to let me desert a man in peril of his life in a tropical jungle. So, in spite of Lady Meadowcroft, I was soon winding my way up a steep mountain track, overgrown with creeping Indian weeds, on my road to the still problematical village graced by the residence of the retired gentleman. After 2 hours' hard climbing, we reached it at last. The retired gentleman led the way to a house in a street of the little wooden hamlet. The door was low. I had to stoop to enter it. I saw in a moment this was indeed no trick. On a native bed in a corner of the one room, a man lay desperately ill. A European with white hair and with a skin well bronzed by exposure to the tropics. Ominous dark spots beneath the epidermis showed the nature of the disease. He tossed restlessly as he lay, but did not raise his fevered head or look at my conductor.
Well, any news of Ramdas?
He asked at last in a parched and feeble voice. Parched and feeble as it was, I recognized it instantly. The man on the bed was Sebastian, no other.
No news of Lamdas,
the retired gentleman replied, with an unexpected display of womanly tenderness.
Lamdas clean gone, not come any more, but I bring you back European doctor Sahib.
Sebastian did not look up from his bed even then. I could see he was more anxious about a message from his scout than about his own condition.
The rascal,
he moaned with his eyes closed tight.
The rascal, he has betrayed me.
And he tossed uneasily. I looked at him and said nothing. Then I seated myself on a low stool by the bedside, and took his hand in mine to feel his pulse. The wrist was thin and wasted. The face, too, I noticed, had fallen away greatly. It was clear that the malignant fever which accompanies the disease had wreaked its worst on him. So weak and ill was he, indeed, that he let me hold his hand, with my fingers on his pulse, for half a minute or more without ever opening his eyes or displaying the slightest curiosity at my presence. One might have thought that European doctors abounded in Nepaul, and that I had been attending him for a week, with a mixture, as before, at every visit. "Your pulse is weak and very rapid," I said slowly in a professional tone. "You seem to me to have fallen into a perilous condition." At the sound of my voice he gave a sudden start. Yet even so, for a second he did not open his eyes. The revelation of my presence seemed to come upon him as in a dream. "Like humble edges," he muttered to himself, gasping. "Exactly like Cumble Edges. But Cumble Edge is dead. I must be delirious. If I didn't know to the contrary, I could have sworn it was Cumble Edges." I spoke again, bending over him. "How long have the glandular swellings been present, Professor?" I asked with quiet deliberativeness. This time he opened his eyes sharply and looked up in my face. He swallowed a great gulp of surprise. His breath came and went. He raised himself on his elbows and stared at me with a fixed stare. "Cumberledge!" he cried. "Cumberledge! Come back to life, then? They told me you were dead, and here you are, Cumberledge!" "Who told you I was dead?" I asked sternly. He stared at me, still in a dazed way. He was more than half comatose. "Your guide Ramdas," he answered at last, half incoherently. "He came back by himself, came back without you. He swore to me he had seen all your throats cut in Tibet. He alone had escaped. The Buddhists had massacred you." "He told you a lie," I said shortly. "I thought so. I thought so. And I sent him back for confirmatory evidence. But the rouge has never brought it." He let his head drop on his rude pillow heavily. "Never, never brought it." I gazed at him full of horror. The man was too ill to hear me, too ill to reason, too ill to recognize the meaning of his own words, almost. Otherwise, perhaps, he would hardly have expressed himself quite so frankly. Though, to be sure, he had said nothing to criminate himself in any way. His action might have been due to anxiety for our safety. I fixed my glance on him long and dubiously. What ought I to do next? As for Sebastian, he lay with his eyes closed, half oblivious of my presence. The fever had gripped him hard. He shivered and looked helpless as a child. In such circumstances the instincts of my profession rose imperative within me. I could not nurse a case properly in this wretched hut. The one thing to be done was to carry the patient down to our camp in the valley. There at least we had air and pure running water. I asked a few questions from the retired gentleman as to the possibility of obtaining sufficient bearers in the village. As I supposed any number were forthcoming immediately. Your Nepalese is by nature a beast of burden. He can carry anything up and down the mountains, and spends his life in the act of carrying. I pulled out my pencil, tore a leaf from my notebook, and scribbled a hasty note to Hilda. "The invalid is, whom do you think? Sebastian. He is dangerously ill, with some malignant fever. I am bringing him down into camp to nurse. Get everything ready for him." Then I handed it over to a messenger, found for me by the retired gentleman, to carry to Hilda. My host himself I could not spare, as he was my only interpreter. In a couple of hours we had improvised a rough woven grass hammock as an ambulance couch, had engaged our bearers, and had got Sebastian under way for the camp by the river. When I arrived at our tents, I found Hilda had prepared everything for our patient with her usual cleverness. Not only had she got a bed ready for Sebastian, who was now almost insensible, but she had even cooked some arrowroot from our stores beforehand, so that he might have a little food with a dash of brandy in it, to recover him after the fatigue of the journey down the mountain. By the time we had laid him out on a mattress in a cool tent, with the fresh air blowing about him, and had made him eat the meal prepared for him, he really began to look comparatively comfortable. Lady Meadowcroft was now our chief trouble. We did not dare to tell her it was really plague, but she had got near enough back to civilization to have recovered her faculty for profuse grumbling, and the idea of the delay that Sebastian would cause us drove her wild with annoyance.
Only 2 days off from Ivor, she cried, and that comfortable bungalow. And now to think we must stop here in the woods a week or 10 days for this horrid old professor. Why can't he get worse at once and die like a gentleman? But there, with you to nurse him, Hilda, he'll never get worse. He couldn't die if he tried. He'll linger on and on for weeks and weeks through a beastly convalescence.
Hubert, Hilda said to me when we were alone once more, we mustn't keep her here. She will be a hindrance, not a help. One way or another, we must manage to get rid of her. How can we? I asked. We can't turn her loose upon the mountain roads with a Nepalese escort. She isn't fit for it. She would be frantic with terror. I've thought of that, and I see only one thing possible. I must go on with her myself as fast as we can push to Sir Ivor's place, and then return to help you nurse the professor. I saw she was right. It was the sole plan open to us, and I had no fear of letting Hilda go off alone with Lady Meadowcroft and the bearers. She was a host in herself, and could manage a party of native servants at least as well as I could. So Hilda went and came back again. Meanwhile, I took charge of the nursing of Sebastian. Fortunately, I had brought with me a good stock of jungle medicines in my little traveling case, including plenty of quinine, and under my careful treatment, the professor passed the crisis and began to mend slowly. The first question he asked me when he felt himself able to talk once more was,
Nurse Wade, what has become of her?
For he had not yet seen her. I feared the shock for him. She is here with me, I answered in a very measured voice. She is waiting to be allowed to come and help me in taking care of you. He shuddered and turned away. His face buried itself in the pillow. I could see some twinge of remorse had seized upon him. At last he spoke.
Cumberledge,
he said in a very low and almost frightened tone.
Don't let her come near me. I can't bear it. I can't bear it.
Ill as he was, I did not mean to let him think I was ignorant of his motive. You can't bear a woman whose life you have attempted, I said in my coldest and most deliberate way, to have a hand in nursing you? You can't bear to let her heap coals of fire on your head. In that you are right. But remember, you have attempted my life too. You have twice done your best to get me murdered. He did not pretend to deny it. He was too weak for subterfuges. He only writhed as he lay.
You are a man, he said shortly, and she is a woman. That is all the difference.
Then he paused for a minute or two.
Don't let her come near me,
he moaned once more in a piteous voice.
Don't let her come near me.
I will not, I answered. She shall not come near you. I spare you that. But you will have to eat the food she prepares, and you know she will not poison you. You will have to be tended by the servants she chooses, and you know they will not murder you. She can heap coals of fire on your head without coming into your tent. Consider that you sought to take her life, and she seeks to save yours. She is as anxious to keep you alive as you are anxious to kill her. He lay as in a reverie. His long white hair made his clear-cut thin face look more unearthly than ever, with the hectic flush of fever upon it. At last he turned to me.
"We each work for our own ends," he said in a weary way. "We pursue our own objects. It suits me to get rid of her. It suits her to keep me alive. I'm no good to her dead. Living, she expects to wring a confession out of me, but she shall not have it. Tenacity of purpose is the one thing I admire in life. She has the tenacity of purpose, and so have I. Camberledge, don't you see it's a mere duel of endurance between us?"
And may the just side win, I answered solemnly. It was several days later before he spoke to me of it again. Hilda had brought some food to the door of the tent and passed it in to me for our patient. "How is he now?" she whispered. Sebastian overheard her voice, and cowering within himself, still managed to answer.
"Better, getting better. I shall soon be well now. You have carried your point. You have cured your enemy."
"Thank God for that," Hilda said, and glided away silently. Sebastian ate his cup of arrowroot in silence. Then he looked at me with wistful, musing eyes.
"Camberledge," he murmured at last, "after all, I can't help admiring that woman. She's the only person who has ever checkmated me. She checkmates me every time. Steadfastness is what I love. Her steadfastness of purpose and her determination move me."
"I wish they would move you to tell the truth," I answered. He mused again.
"To tell the truth," he muttered, moving his head up and down, "I have lived for science. Shall I wreck all now? There are truths which it is better to hide than to proclaim. Uncomfortable truths, truths that never should have been, truths which help to make greater truths incredible. But all the same, I cannot help admiring that woman. She has Jock Bannerman's intellect, with a great deal more than Jock Bannerman's force of will. Such firmness, such energy, such resolute patience. She is a wonderful creature. I can't help admiring her."
I said no more to him just then. I thought it better to let nascent remorse and nascent admiration work out their own natural effects unimpeded, for I could see our enemy was beginning to feel some sting of remorse. Some men are below it. Sebastian thought himself above it. I felt sure he was mistaken. Yet, even in the midst of these personal preoccupations, I saw that our great teacher was still as ever the pure man of science. He noted every symptom and every change of the disease with professional accuracy. He observed his own case, whenever his mind was clear enough, as impartially as he would have observed any outside patient's.
"This is a rare chance, Camberledge," he whispered to me once in an interval of delirium. "So few Europeans have ever had the complaint, and probably none who were competent to describe the specific subjective and psychological symptoms. The delusions one gets as one sinks into the coma, for example, are of a quite peculiar type. Delusions of wealth and of absolute power, most exhilarating and magnificent. I think myself a millionaire or a prime minister. Be sure you make a note of that in case I die. If I recover, of course I can write an exhaustive monograph on the whole history of the disease in the British Medical Journal. But if I die, the task of chronicling these interesting observations will devolve upon you, a most exceptional chance. You are much to be congratulated."
You must not die, Professor, I cried, thinking more, I will confess, of Hilda Wade than of himself. You must live to report this case for science. I used what I thought the strongest lever I knew for him. He closed his eyes dreamily.
For science, yes, for science. There you strike the right chord. What have I not dared and done for science? But in case I die, Cumberledge, be sure you collect the notes I took as I was sickening. They are most important for the history and etiology of the disease. I made them hourly, and don't forget the main points to be observed as I am dying. You know what they are. This is a rare, rare chance. I congratulate you on being the man who has the first opportunity ever afforded us of questioning an intelligent European case. A case where the patient is fully capable of describing with accuracy his symptoms and his sensations in medical phraseology.
He did not die, however. In about another week he was well enough to move. We carried him down to Muzaffarpur, the first large town in the plains thereabouts, and handed him over for the stage of convalescence to the care of the able and efficient station doctor, to whom my thanks are due for much courteous assistance. "And now what do you mean to do?" I asked Hilda, when our patient was placed in other hands and all was over. She answered me without one second's hesitation. "Go straight to Bombay, and wait there till Sebastian takes passage for England." "He will go home, you think, as soon as he is well enough?" "Undoubtedly. He has now nothing more to stop in India for." "Why not as much as ever?" She looked at me curiously. "It is so hard to explain," she replied after a moment's pause, during which she had been drumming her little forefinger on the table. "I feel it rather than reason it. But don't you see that a certain change has lately come over Sebastian's attitude? He no longer desires to follow me. He wants to avoid me. That is why I wish more than ever to dog his steps. I feel the beginning of the end has come. I am gaining my point. Sebastian is wavering." "Then when he engages a berth, you propose to go by the same steamer?" "Yes, it makes all the difference. When he tries to follow me, he is dangerous. When he tries to avoid me, it becomes my work in life to follow him. I must keep him in sight every minute now. I must quicken his conscience. I must make him feel his own desperate wickedness. He is afraid to face me. That means remorse. The more I compel him to face me, the more the remorse is sure to deepen." I saw she was right. We took the train to Bombay. I found rooms at the Hospital Club by a member's invitation, while Hilda went to stop with some friends of Lady Meadowcroft's on the Malabar Hill. We waited for Sebastian to come down from the interior and take his passage. Hilda, with her intuitive certainty, felt sure he would come. End of chapter 11, part 1. Read by Lars Rolander. Chapter 11, Part 2 of Hilda Wade. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Lars Rolander. Hilda Wade, A Woman with Tenacity of Purpose, by Grant Allen. Chapter 11, Part 2. A steamer, two steamers, three steamers sailed, and still no Sebastian. I began to think he must have made up his mind to go back some other way, but Hilda was confident, so I waited patiently. At last one morning I dropped in, as I had often done before, at the office of one of the chief steamship companies. It was the very morning when a packet was to sail. "Can I see the list of passengers on the Vindhya?" I asked the clerk a sandy-haired Englishman, tall, thin, and sallow. The clerk produced it. I scanned it in haste. To my surprise and delight, a penciled entry halfway down the list gave the name Professor Sebastian. "Oh, Sebastian is going by this steamer?" I murmured, looking up. A sandy-haired clerk hummed and hesitated. "Well, I believe he is going, sir," he answered at last, "but it's a bit uncertain. He's a fidgety man, the professor. He came down here this morning and asked to see the list, the same as you have done. Then he engaged a berth provisionally. Mind, provisionally, he said. That's why his name is only put in on the list in pencil. I take it he's waiting to know whether a party of friends he wishes to meet are going also." Or wishes to avoid, I thought to myself inwardly, but I did not say so. I asked instead, "Is he coming again?" "Yes, I think so, at 5:30." "And she sails at 7?" "At 7 punctually. Passengers must be aboard by 6:30 at latest." "Very good," I answered, making up my mind promptly. "I only called to know the professor's movements. Don't mention to him that I came. I may look in again myself an hour or two later." "You don't want a passage, sir? You may be the friend he's expecting." "No, I don't want a passage, not at present, certainly." Then I ventured on a bold stroke. "Look here," I said, leaning across towards him, and assuming a confidential tone. "I am a private detective," which was perfectly true in essence, "and I am dogging the professor who, for all his eminence, is gravely suspected of a great crime. If you will help me, I will make it worth your while. Let us understand one another. I offer you a £5 note to say nothing of all this to him." The sallow clerk's fishy eyes glistened. "You can depend upon me," he answered, with an acquiescent nod. I judged that he didn't often get the chance of earning some 80 rupees so easily. I scribbled a hasty note and sent it round to Hilda. "Pack your boxes at once, and hold yourself in readiness to embark on the Vindhya at 6 o'clock precisely." Then I put my own things straight and waited at the club till 5:45. At that time I strolled on unconcernedly into the office. A cab outside held Hilda and our luggage. I had arranged it all meanwhile by letter. "Professor Sebastian been here again?" I asked. "Yes, sir, he's been here, and he looked over the list again, and he's taken his passage. But he muttered something about eavesdroppers, and said that if he wasn't satisfied when he got on board, he would return at once and ask for a cabin in exchange by the next steamer." "That will do," I answered, slipping the promised £5 note into the clerk's open palm, which closed over it convulsively. Talked about eavesdroppers, did he? Then he knows he's been shadowed. It may console you to learn that you are instrumental in furthering the aims of justice and unmasking a cruel and wicked conspiracy. Now, the next thing is this. I want 2 berths at once by this very steamer, one for myself, name of Cumberledge, and one for a lady, name of Wade, and look sharp about it." The sandy-haired man did look sharp, and within 3 minutes we were driving off with our tickets to Prince's Dock landing stage. We slipped on board unobtrusively, and instantly took refuge in our respective staterooms till the steamer was well under way and fairly out of sight of Kolaba Island. Only after all chance of Sebastian's avoiding us was gone for ever did we venture up on deck on purpose to confront him. It was one of those delicious balmy evenings which one gets only at sea and in the warmer latitudes. The sky was alive with myriads of twinkling and palpitating stars, which seemed to come and go like sparks on a fire back, as one gazed upwards into the vast depths and tried to place them. They played hide and seek with one another and with the innumerable meteors, which shot recklessly every now and again across the field of the firmament, leaving momentary furrows of light behind them. Beneath, the sea sparkled almost like the sky, for every turn of the screw churned up the scintillating phosphorescence in the water, so that countless little jets of living fire seemed to flash and die away at the summit of every wavelet. A tall, spare man in a picturesque cloak, and with long, lank white hair, leant over the taffrail, gazing at the numberless flashing lights of the surface. As he gazed, he talked on in his clear, rapt voice to a stranger by his side. The voice and the ring of enthusiasm were unmistakable. "Oh no," he was saying as we stole up behind him, "that hypothesis, I venture to assert, is no longer tenable by the light of recent researches. Death and decay have nothing to do directly with the phosphorescence of the sea, though they have a little indirectly. The light is due, in the main, to numerous minute living organisms, most of them bacilli, on which I once made several close observations and crucial experiments. They possess organs which may be regarded as miniature bull's eye lanterns, and these organs—" "What a lovely evening, Hubert!" Hilda said to me in an apparently unconcerned voice as the Professor reached this point in his exposition. Sebastian's voice quavered and stammered for a moment. He tried just at first to continue and complete his sentence. "And these organs," he went on aimlessly, "these bull's eyes that I spoke about are so arranged. I was speaking on the subject of crustaceans. I think crustaceans so arranged—" Then he broke down utterly and turned sharply round to me. He did not look at Hilda. I think he did not dare, but he faced me with his head down and his long thin neck protruded, eyeing me from under those overhanging penthouse brows of his. "You sneak!" he cried passionately. "You sneak! You have dogged me by false pretenses. You have lied to bring this about. You have come aboard under a false name, you and your accomplice." I faced him in turn, erect and unflinching. "Professor Sebastian," I answered in my coldest and calmest tone, "you say what is not true. If you consult the list of passengers by the windaya, now posted near the companion ladder, you will find the names of Hilda Wade and Hubert Cumberledge duly entered. We took our passage after you inspected the list at the office to see whether our names were there, in order to avoid us. But you cannot avoid us. We do not mean that you shall avoid us. We will dog you now through life, not by lies or subterfuge, as you say, but openly and honestly. It is you who need to slink and cower, not we. The prosecutor need not descend to the sordid shifts of the criminal." The other passenger had sidled away quietly the moment he saw our conversation was likely to be private, and I spoke in a low voice, though clearly and impressively, because I did not wish for a scene. I was only endeavoring to keep alive the slow, smoldering fire of remorse in the man's bosom, and I saw I had touched him on a spot that hurt. Sebastian drew himself up and answered nothing. For a minute or two he stood erect, with folded arms, gazing moodily before him. Then he said, as if to himself, "I owe the man my life. He nursed me through the plague. If it had not been for that, if he had not tended me so carefully in that valley in Nepal, I would throw him overboard now, catch him in my arms and throw him overboard. I would, and be hanged for it." He walked past us as if he saw us not. Silent, erect, moody. Hilda stepped aside and let him pass. He never even looked at her. I knew why. He dared not. Every day now, remorse for the evil part he had played in her life, respect for the woman who had unmasked and outwitted him, made it more and more impossible for Sebastian to face her. During the whole of that voyage, though he dined in the same saloon and paced the same deck, he never spoke to her. He never so much as looked at her. Once or twice their eyes met by accident, and Hilda stared him down. Sebastian's eyelids dropped, and he stole away uneasily. In public we gave no overt sign of our differences, but it was understood on board that the relations were strained, that Professor Sebastian and Dr. Cumberledge had been working at the same hospital in London together, and that owing to some disagreement between them, Dr. Cumberledge had resigned, which made it most awkward for them to be traveling together by the same steamer. We passed through the Suez Canal and down the Mediterranean. All the time Sebastian never again spoke to us. The passengers indeed held aloof from the solitary, gloomy old man who strode along the quarterdeck with his long, slow stride, absorbed in his own thoughts, and intent only on avoiding Hilda and myself. His mood was unsociable. As for Hilda, her helpful, winning ways made her a favorite with all the women, as her pretty face did with all the men. For the first time in his life, Sebastian seemed to be aware that he was shunned. He retired more and more within himself for company. His keen eyes began to lose in some degree its extraordinary fire, his expression to forget its magnetic attractiveness. Indeed, it was only young men of scientific tastes that Sebastian could ever attract. Among them his eager zeal, his single-minded devotion to the cause of science, awoke always a responsive chord which vibrated powerfully. Day after day passed, and we steamed through the straits and neared the Channel. Our thoughts began to assume a home complexion. Everybody was full of schemes as to what he would do when he reached England. Old Bradshaws were overhauled and trains looked out, on the supposition that we would get in by such an hour on Tuesday. We were steaming along the French coast of the western promontory of Brittany. The evening was fine, and though of course less warm than we had experienced of late, yet pleasant and summer-like. We watched the distant cliffs of the Finistère mainland, and the numerous little islands that lie off the shore, all basking in the unreal glow of a deep red sunset. The first officer was in charge, a very cocksure and careless young man, handsome and dark-haired, the sort of young man who thought more of creating an impression upon the minds of the lady passengers than of the duties of his position. "Aren't you going down to your berth?" I asked of Hilda about 10:30 that night. "The air is so much colder here than you have been feeling it of late, that I'm afraid of your chilling yourself." She looked up at me with a smile, and drew her little fluffy white woolen wrap closer about her shoulders. "Am I so very valuable to you, then?" she asked, for I suppose my glance had been a trifle too tender for a mere acquaintance's. "No, thank you, Hubert. I don't think I'll go down. And if you're wise, you won't go down either. I distrust this first officer. He's a careless navigator, and tonight his head's too full of that pretty Mrs. Ogilvy. He has been flirting with her desperately ever since we left Bombay, and tomorrow he knows he will lose her forever. His mind isn't occupied with the navigation at all. What he's thinking of is how soon his watch will be over, so that he may come down off the bridge onto the quarterdeck to talk to her. Don't you see she's lurking over yonder, looking up at the stars, and waiting for him by the compass? Poor child, she has a bad husband, and now she has let herself get too much entangled with this empty young fellow. I shall be glad for her sake to see her safely landed and out of the man's clutches." As she spoke, the first officer glanced down towards Mrs. Ogilvy, and held out his chronometer with an encouraging smile which seemed to say, "Only an hour and a half more now. At 12 I shall be with you." "Perhaps you're right, Hilda," I answered, taking a seat beside her and throwing away my cigar. "This is one of the worst bits of the French coast that we're approaching. We're not far off Ushant. I wish the captain were on the bridge instead of this helter-skelter, self-conceited young fellow. He's too cocksure. He knows so much about seamanship that he could take a ship through any rocks on his course, blindfold, in his own opinion. I always doubt a man who is so much at home in his subject that he never has to think about it. Most things in this world are done by thinking." "We can't see the Ushant light," Hilda remarked, looking ahead. "No, there's a little haze about on the horizon, I fancy. See, the stars are fading away. It begins to feel damp. Sea mist in the channel." Hilda sat uneasily in her deck chair. "That's bad," she answered, "for the first officer is taking no more heed of Ushant than of his latter end." He has forgotten the existence of the Breton coast. His head is just stuffed with Mrs. Ogilvy's eyelashes. Very pretty long eyelashes, too. I don't deny it. But they won't help him to get through the narrow channel. They say it's dangerous. Dangerous, I answered. Not a bit of it with reasonable care. Nothing at sea is dangerous except the inexplicable recklessness of navigators. There's always plenty of sea room, if they care to take it. Collisions and icebergs, to be sure, are dangers that can't be avoided at times, especially if there's fog about. But I've been enough at sea in my time to know this much at least, that no coast in the world is dangerous except by dint of reckless corner cutting. Captains of great ships behave exactly like two hansom drivers in the streets of London. They think they can just shave past without grazing, and they do shave past 9 times out of 10. The 10th time they run on the rocks through sheer recklessness and lose their vessel. And then the newspapers always ask the same solemn question, in childish good faith: how did so experienced and able a navigator come to make such a mistake in his reckoning? He made no mistake. He simply tried to cut it fine, and cut it too fine for once, with the result that he usually loses his own life and his passengers. That's all. We who have been at sea understand that perfectly. Just at that moment another passenger strolled up and joined us, a Bengal civil servant. He drew his chair over by Hilda's and began discussing Mrs. Ogilvy's eyes and the first officer's flirtations. Hilda hated gossip and took refuge in generalities. In 3 minutes the talk had wandered off to Ibsen's influence on the English drama, and we had forgotten the very existence of the Isle of Ushant. The English public will never understand Ibsen, the newcomer said reflectively, with the omniscient air of the Indian civilian. He is too purely Scandinavian. He represents that part of the continental mind which is farthest removed from the English temperament. To him, respectability, our God, is not only no fetish, it is the unspeakable thing, the Moabitish abomination. He will not bow down to the golden image which our British Nebuchadnezzar, King Demos, has made, and which he asks us to worship. And the British Nebuchadnezzar will never get beyond the worship of his Vishnu. Respectability, the deity of the pure and blameless ratepayer. So Ibsen must always remain a seal book to the vast majority of the English people. That is true, Hilda answered, as to his direct influence. But don't you think indirectly he is leavening England? A man so wholly out of tune with the prevailing note of English life could only effect it, of course, by means of disciples and popularizers, often even popularizers who but dimly and distantly apprehend his meaning. He must be interpreted to the English by English intermediaries, half Philistine themselves, who speak his language ill, and who miss the greater part of his message. Yet only by such half hints. Why, what was that? I think I saw something. Even as she uttered the words, a terrible jar ran fiercely through the ship from stem to stern, a jar that made one clench one's teeth and hold one's jaws tight, the jar of a prow that chattered against a rock. I took it all in at a glance. We had forgotten Ushant, but Ushant had not forgotten us. It had revenged itself upon us by revealing its existence. In a moment all was turmoil and confusion on deck. I cannot describe the scene that followed. Sailors rushed to and fro, unfastening ropes and lowering boats with admirable discipline. Women shrieked and cried aloud in helpless terror. The voice of the first officer could be heard above the din, endeavoring to atone by courage and coolness in the actual disaster for its recklessness in causing it. Passengers rushed on deck half clad and waited for their turn to take places in the boats. It was a time of terror, turmoil, and hubbub. But in the midst of it all, Hilda turned to me with infinite calm in her voice. "Where is Sebastian?" she asked in a perfectly collected tone. "Whatever happens, We must not lose sight of him."
"I'm here," another voice, equally calm, responded beside her. "You are a brave woman. Whether I sink or swim, I admire your courage, your steadfastness of purpose." It was the only time he had addressed a word to her during the entire voyage. They put the women and children into the first boats lowered. Mothers and little ones went first, single women and widows after. "Now, Miss Wade," the first officer said, taking her gently by the shoulders when her turn arrived. "Make haste, don't keep us waiting." But Hilda held back. "No, no," she said firmly. "I won't go yet. I'm waiting for the men's boat. I must not leave Professor Sebastian." The first officer shrugged his shoulders. There was no time for protest. "Next, then," he said quickly. "Miss Martin, Miss Weatherly." Sebastian took her hand and tried to force her in. "You must go," he said in a low, persuasive tone. "You must not wait for me." He hated to see her, I knew, but I imagined in his voice, for I noted it even then, there rang some undertone of genuine desire to save her. Hilda loosened his grasp resolutely. "No, no," she answered. "I cannot fly. I shall never leave you." "Not even if I promise?" She shook her head and closed her lips hard. "Certainly not," she said again after a pause. "I cannot trust you. Besides, I must stop by your side and do my best to save you. Your life is all in all to me. I dare not risk it." His gaze was now pure admiration. "As you will," he answered, "for he that loseth his life shall gain it." "If ever we land alive," Hilda answered, glowing red in spite of the danger, "I shall remind you of that word. I shall call upon you to fulfill it." The boat was lowered, and still Hilda stood by my side. 1 second later, another shock shook us. The windaya parted amidships, and we found ourselves struggling and choking in the cold sea water. It was a miracle that every soul of us was not drowned that moment, as many of us were. The swirling eddy which followed as the windaya sank swamped two of the boats and carried down not a few of those who were standing on the deck with us. The last I saw of the first officer was a writhing form whirled about in the water. Before he sank, he shouted aloud with a seaman's frank courage: "Say it was all my fault. I accept the responsibility. I ran her too close. I'm the only one to blame for it." Then he disappeared in the whirlpool caused by the sinking ship, and we were left still struggling. One of the life rafts, hastily rigged by the sailors, floated our way. Hilda struck out a stroke or two and caught it. She dragged herself onto it and beckoned me to follow. I could see she was holding on to something tightly. I struck out in turn and reached the raft, which was composed of two seats, fastened together in haste at the first note of danger. I hauled myself up by Hilda's side. "Help me to pull him aboard," she cried in an agonized voice. "I'm afraid he has lost consciousness." Then I looked at the object she was clutching in her hands. It was Sebastian's white head, apparently quite lifeless. I pulled him up with her and laid him out on the raft. A very faint breeze from the southwest had sprung up. That and a strong seaward current that sets round the rocks were carrying us straight out from the Breton coast and all chance of rescue towards the open channel. But Hilda thought nothing of such physical danger. "We have saved him, Hubert," she cried, clasping her hands. "We have saved him. But do you think he is alive? For unless he is, my chance, our chance, is gone forever." I bent over and felt his pulse. As far as I could make out, it still beat feebly. End of chapter 11, part 2. Read by Lars Rolander. Chapter 12 of Hilda Wade. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Lars Rolander.
Hilda Wade, A Woman with Tenacity of Purpose by Grant Allen. Chapter 12. The Episode of the Dead Man Who Spoke. I will not trouble you with details of those 3 terrible days and nights when we drifted helplessly about at the mercy of the currents on our improvised life raft up and down the English Channel. The first night was the worst. Slowly after that we grew used to the danger, the cold, the hunger, and the thirst. Our senses were numbed. We passed whole hours together in a sort of torpor, just vaguely wondering whether a ship would come in sight to save us, obeying the merciful law that those who are utterly exhausted are incapable of acute fear, and acquiescing in the probability of our own extinction. But however slender the chance, and as the hours stole on it seemed slender enough, Hilda still kept her hopes fixed mainly on Sebastian. No daughter could have watched the father she loved more eagerly and closely than Hilda watched her lifelong enemy, the man who had wrought such evil upon her and hers. To save our own lives without him would be useless. At all hazards she must keep him alive on the bare chance of a rescue. If he died, there died with him the last hope of justice and redress. As for Sebastian, after the first half hour during which he lay white and unconscious, he opened his eyes faintly, as we could see by the moonlight, and gazed around him with a strange puzzled state of inquiry. Then his senses returned to him by degrees. "What, you, Cumberledge?" he murmured, measuring me with his eye. "And you, Nurse Wade? Well, I thought you would manage it." There was a tone almost of amusement in his voice, a half ironical tone which had been familiar to us in the old hospital days. He raised himself on one arm and gazed at the water all round. Then he was silent for some minutes. At last he spoke again. "Do you know what I ought to do if I were consistent?" he asked with a tinge of pathos in his words. "Jump off this raft and deprive you of your last chance of triumph, the triumph which you have worked for so hard. You want to save my life for your own ends, not for mine. Why should I help you to my own undoing?" Hilda's voice was tenderer and softer than usual as she answered. "No, not for my own ends alone, and not for your undoing, but to give you one last chance of unburdening your conscience. Some men are too small to be capable of remorse. Their little souls have no room for such a feeling. You are great enough to feel it and to try to crush it down. But you cannot crush it down. It crops up in spite of you. You have tried to bury it in your soul, and you have failed. It is your remorse that has driven you to make so many attempts against the only living souls who knew and understood. If ever we get safely to land once more, and God knows it is not likely, I give you still the chance of repairing the mischief you have done, and of clearing my father's memory from the cruel stain which you, and only you, can wipe away." Sebastian lay long silent once more, gazing up at her fixedly, with the foggy, white moonlight shining upon his bright, inscrutable eyes. "You are a brave woman, Maisie York Bannerman," he said at last slowly. "A very brave woman. I will try to live. I, too, for a purpose of my own. I say it again. He that loseth his life shall gain it." Incredible as it may sound, in half an hour more he was lying fast asleep on that wave-tossed raft, and Hilda and I were watching him tenderly. And it seemed to us as we watched him that a change had come over those stern and impassive features. They had softened and melted until his face was that of a gentler and better type. It was as if some inward change of soul was molding the fierce old professor into a nobler and more venerable man. Day after day we drifted on, without food or water. The agony was terrible. I will not attempt to describe it, for to do so is to bring it back too clearly to my memory. Hilda and I, being younger and stronger, bore up against it well. But Sebastian, old and worn, and still weak from the plague, grew daily weaker. His pulse just beat, and sometimes I could hardly feel it thrill under my finger. He became delirious and murmured much about York Bannerman's daughter. Sometimes he forgot all and spoke to me in the friendly terms of our old acquaintance at Nathaniel's, giving me directions and advice about imaginary operations. Hour after hour we watched for a sail, and no sail appeared. One could hardly believe we could toss about so long in the main highway of traffic without seeing a ship or spying more than the smoke trail of some passing steamer. As far as I could judge, during those days and nights, the wind veered from southwest to southeast and carried us steadily and surely towards the open Atlantic. On the third evening out, about 5 o'clock, I saw a dark object on the horizon. Was it moving towards us? We strained our eyes in breathless suspense. A minute passed, and then another. Yes, there could be no doubt. It grew larger and larger. It was a ship, a steamer. We made all the signs of distress we could manage. I stood up and waved Hilda's white shawl frantically in the air. There was half an hour of suspense, and our hearts sank as we thought that they were about to pass us. Then the steamer hove to a little and seemed to notice us. Next instant we dropped upon our knees, for we saw they were lowering a boat. They were coming to our aid. They would be in time to save us. Hilda watched our rescuers with parted lips and agonized eyes. Then she felt Sebastian's pulse. "Thank Heaven!" she cried. "He still lives. They will be here before he is quite past confession." Sebastian opened his eyes dreamily. "A boat?" he asked. "Yes, a boat." "Then you have gained your point, child. I am able to collect myself. Give me a few hours more life, and what I can do to make amends to you shall be done." I don't know why, but it seemed longer between the time when the boat was lowered and the moment when it reached us than it had seemed during the 3 days and nights we lay tossing about helplessly on the open Atlantic. There were times when we could hardly believe it was really moving. At last, however, it reached us, and we saw the kindly faces and outstretched hands of our rescuers. Hilda clung to Sebastian with a wild clasp as the men reached out for her. "No, take him first," she cried, when the sailors, after the custom of men, tried to help her into the gig before attempting to save us. "His life is worth more to me than my own. Take him, and for God's sake lift him gently, for he is nearly gone." They took him aboard and laid him down in the stern. Then, and then only, Hilda stepped into the boat, and I staggered after her. The officer in charge, a kind young Irishman, had had the foresight to bring brandy and a little beef essence. We ate and drank what we dared as they rowed us back to the steamer. Sebastian lay back with his white eyelashes closed over the lids and the livid dew of death upon his emaciated cheeks, but he drank a teaspoonful or two of brandy and swallowed the beef essence with which Hilda fed him. "Your father is the most exhausted of the party," the officer said in a low undertone. "Poor fellow, he is too old for such adventures. He seems to have hardly a spark of life left in him." Hilda shuddered with evident horror. "He is not my father, thank Heaven!" she cried, leaning over him and supporting his drooping head in spite of her own fatigue and the cold that chilled our very bones. "But I think he will live. I mean him to live. He is my best friend now, and my bitterest enemy." The officer looked at her in surprise, and then touched his forehead inquiringly, with a quick glance at me. He evidently thought cold and hunger had affected her reason. I shook my head. "It is a peculiar case," I whispered. "What the lady says is right. Everything depends for us upon our keeping him alive till we reach England." They rowed us to the boat, and we were handed tenderly up the side. There the ship's surgeon and everybody else on board did their best to restore us after our terrible experience. The ship was the Don, of the Royal Mail Steamship Company's West Indian Line, and nothing could exceed the kindness with which we were treated by every soul on board, from the captain to the stewardess and the junior cabin boy. Sebastian's great name carried weight even here. As soon as it was generally understood on board that we had brought with us the famous physiologist and pathologist, the man whose name was famous throughout Europe, we might have asked for anything that the ship contained without fear of a refusal. But indeed Hilda's sweet face was enough in itself to win the interest and sympathy of all who saw it. By 11 next morning we were off Plymouth Sound, and by midday we had landed at the Mill Bay docks, and were on our way to a comfortable hotel in the neighborhood. Hilda was too good a nurse to bother Sebastian at once about his implied promise. She had him put to bed and kept him there carefully. "What do you think of his condition?" she asked me after the second day was over. I could see by her own grave face that she had already formed her own conclusions. "He cannot recover," I answered. "His constitution, shattered by the plague and by his incessant exertions, has received too severe a shock in this shipwreck. He is doomed." "So I think. The change is but temporary. He will not last out 3 days more, I fancy." "He has rallied wonderfully to day," I said, "but 'tis a passing rally, a flicker, no more. If you wish to do anything, now is the moment. If you delay, you will be too late." "I will go in and see him," Hilda answered. "I have said nothing more to him, but I think he is moved. I think he means to keep his promise. He has shown a strange tenderness to me these last few days. I almost believe he is at last remorseful and ready to undo the evil which he has done." She stole softly into the sick room. I followed her on tiptoe, and stood near the door behind the screen which shut off the draught from the patient. Sebastian stretched his arms out to her. "Ah, Maisie, my child!" he cried, addressing her by the name she had borne in her childhood. Both were her own. "Don't leave me any more. Stay with me always, Maisie. I can't get on without you." "But you hated once to see me." "Because I have so wronged you." "And now, will you do nothing to repair the wrong?" "My child, I can never undo that wrong. It is irreparable, for the past can never be recalled, but I will try my best to minimize it. Call Cumberledge in. I am quite sensible now, quite conscious. You will be my witness, Cumberledge, that my pulse is normal and that my brain is clear. I will confess it all, Maisie. Your constancy and your firmness have conquered me, and your devotion to your father. If only I had had a daughter like you, my girl, one whom I could have loved and trusted, I might have been a better man. I might even have done better work for science, though, on that side at least, I have little with which to reproach myself." Hilda bent over him. "Hubert and I are here," she said slowly, in a strangely calm voice. "But that is not enough. I want a public, an attested confession. It must be given before witnesses, and signed and sworn to.
Somebody might throw doubt upon my word and Hubert's." Sebastian shrank back. "Given before witnesses and signed and sworn to, Maisie, is this humiliation necessary? Do you exact it?" Hilda was inexorable. "You know yourself how you are situated. You have only a day or two to live," she said in an impressive voice. "You must do it at once or never. You have postponed it all your life. Now, at this last moment, you must make up for it. Will you die with an act of injustice unconfessed on your conscience?"
He paused and struggled.
"I could, if it were not for you," he answered. "Then do it for me," Hilda cried. "Do it for me. I ask it of you not as a favor, but as a right. I demand it." She stood white, stern, inexorable, by his couch, and laid her hand upon his shoulder. He paused once more. Then he murmured feebly, in a querulous tone, "What witnesses? Whom do you wish to be present?" Hilda spoke clearly and distinctly. She had thought it all out with herself beforehand. "Such witnesses as will carry absolute conviction to the mind of all the world, irreproachable, disinterested witnesses, official witnesses. In the first place, a commissioner of oaths, then a Plymouth doctor, to show that you are in a fit state of mind to make a confession. Next, Mr. Horace Mayfield, who defended my father. Lastly, Dr. Blake Crawford, who watched the case on your behalf at the trial." "But, Hilda," I interposed, "we may possibly find that they cannot come away from London just now. They are busy men and likely to be engaged." "They will come if I pay their fees. I do not mind how much this costs me. What is money compared to this one great object of my life? And then, the delay. Suppose that we are too late. He will live some days yet. I can telegraph up at once. I want no hole and corner confession, which may afterwards be useless, but an open avowal before the most approved witnesses. If he will make it, well and good. If not, my life work will have failed. But I had rather it failed than draw back 1 inch from the course which I have laid down for myself." I looked at the worn face of Sebastian. He nodded his head slowly. "She has conquered," he answered, turning upon the pillow. "Let her have her own way. I hid it for years for science's sake. That was my motive, Cumberledge, and I am too near death to lie. Science has now nothing more to gain or lose by me. I have served her well, but I am worn out in her service. Maisie may do as she will. I accept her ultimatum."
We telegraphed up at once. Fortunately, both men were disengaged, and both keenly interested in the case. By that evening Horace Mayfield was talking it all over with me in the hotel at Southampton.
"Well, Hubert, my boy," he said, "a woman we know can do a great deal."
He smiled his familiar smile, like a genial fat toad.
"But if your Jock Bannerman succeeds in getting a confession out of Sebastian, she'll extort my admiration."
He paused a moment, then he added in an afterthought,
"I say that she'll extort my admiration, but mind you, I don't know that I shall feel inclined to believe it. The facts have always appeared to me, strictly between ourselves, you know, to admit of only one explanation."
"Wait and see," I answered. "You think it more likely that Miss Wade will have persuaded Sebastian to confess to things that never happened than that he will convince you of Jock Bannerman's innocence?" The great Q.C. fingered his cigarette holder affectionately.
"You hit it the first time," he answered. "That is precisely my attitude. The evidence against our poor friend was so peculiarly black, it would take a great deal to make me disbelieve it."
"But surely a confession "
"Ah, well, let me hear the confession, and then I shall be better able to judge."
Even as he spoke, Hilda had entered the room. "There will be no difficulty about that, Mr. Mayfield.
You shall hear it, and I trust that it will make you repent for taking so black a view of the case of your own client." "Without prejudice, Miss Bannerman, without prejudice," said the lawyer with some confusion. "Our conversation is entirely between ourselves, and to the world I have always upheld that your father was an innocent man." But such distinctions are too subtle for a loving woman. "He was an innocent man," she said angrily. "It was your business not only to believe it, but to prove it. You have neither believed it nor proved it, but if you will come upstairs with me, I will show you that I have done both." Mayfield glanced at me and shrugged his fat shoulders. Hilda had led the way, and we both followed her. In the room of the sick man our other witnesses were waiting. A tall, dark, austere man, who was introduced to me as Dr. Blake Crawford, whose name I had heard as having watched the case for Sebastian at the time of the investigation. There were present also a commissioner of oaths, and Dr. Maybe, a small local practitioner, whose attitude towards the great scientist was almost absurdly reverential. The three men were grouped at the foot of the bed, and Mayfield and I joined them. Hilda stood beside the dying man and rearranged the pillow against which he was propped. Then she held some brandy to his lips. "Now," said she. The stimulant brought a shade of color into his ghastly cheeks, and the old quick, intelligent gleam came back into his deep sunk eyes. "A remarkable woman, gentlemen," said he. "A very noteworthy woman. I had prided myself that my will power was the most powerful in the country. I had never met any to match it, but I do not mind admitting that, for firmness and tenacity, this lady is my equal. She was anxious that I should adopt one course of action. I was determined to adopt another. Your presence here is a proof that she has prevailed." He paused for breath, and she gave him another small sip of the brandy. "I execute her will ungrudgingly, and with the conviction that it is the right and proper course for me to take," he continued. "You will forgive me some of the ill which I have done you, Maisie, when I tell you that I really died this morning, all unknown to Cumberledge and you, and that nothing but my will force has sufficed to keep spirit and body together until I should carry out your will in the manner which you suggested. I shall be glad when I have finished, for the effort is a painful one, and I long for the peace of dissolution. It is now 7:15. I have every hope that I may be able to leave before 8." It was strange to hear the perfect coolness with which he discussed his own approaching dissolution. Calm, pale, and impassive, his manner was that of a professor addressing his class. I had seen him speak so to a ring of dressers in the old days at Nathaniel's. "The circumstances which led up to the death of Admiral Scott Prideaux, and the suspicions which caused the arrest of Dr. York Bannerman, have never yet been fully explained, although they were by no means so profound that they might not have been unravelled at the time had a man of intellect concentrated his attention upon them. The police, however, were incompetent, and the legal advisers of Dr. Bannerman hardly less so, and a woman only has had the wit to see that a gross injustice has been done. The true facts I will now lay before you." Mayfield's broad face had reddened with indignation, but now his curiosity drove out every other emotion, and he leaned forward with the rest of us to hear the old man's story. "In the first place, I must tell you that both Dr. Bannerman and myself were engaged at the time in an investigation upon the nature and properties of the vegetable alkaloids, and especially of aconitine. We hoped for the very greatest results from this drug, and we were both equally enthusiastic in our research. Especially, we had reasons to believe that it might have a most successful action in the case of a certain rare but deadly disease into the nature of which I need not enter. Reasoning by analogy, we were convinced that we had a certain cure for this particular ailment. Our investigation, however, was somewhat hampered by the fact that the condition in question is rare out of tropical countries, and that in our hospital wards we had not, at that time, any example of it. So serious was this obstacle that it seemed that we must leave other men more favorably situated to reap the benefit of our work and enjoy the credit of our discovery. But a curious chance gave us exactly what we were in search of. At the instant when we were about to despair, it was York Bannerman who came to me in my laboratory one day to tell me that he had in his private practice the very condition of which we were in search. The patient, said he, is my uncle, Admiral Scott Prideaux. Your uncle! I cried in amazement. But how came he to develop such a condition? His last commission in the Navy was spent upon the Malabar coast, where the disease is endemic. There can be no doubt that it has been latent in his system ever since, and that the irritability of temper and indecision of character of which his family have so often had to complain were really among the symptoms of his complaint. I examined the Admiral in consultation with my colleague, and I confirmed his diagnosis. But to my surprise, York Bannerman showed the most invincible and reprehensible objection to experiment upon his relative. In vain I assured him that he must place his duty to science high above all other considerations. It was only after great pressure that I could persuade him to add an infinitesimal portion of aconitine to his prescriptions. The drug was a deadly one, he said, and the toxic dose was still to be determined. He could not push it in the case of a relative who trusted himself to his care. I tried to shake him in what I regarded as his absurd squeamishness, but in vain. But I had another resource. Bannerman's prescriptions were made up by a fellow named Barclay, who had been dispenser at Nathaniel's, and afterwards set up as a chemist in Sackville Street. This man was absolutely in my power. I had discovered him at Nathaniel's in dishonest practices, and I held evidence which would have sent him to jail. I held this over him now, and I made him, unknown to Bannerman, increase the doses of aconitine in the medicine until they were sufficient for my experimental purposes. I will not enter into figures, but suffice it that Bannerman was giving more than 10 times what he imagined. You know the sequel. I was called in and suddenly found that I had Bannerman in my power. There had been a very keen rivalry between us in science. He was the only man in England whose career might impinge upon mine. I had this supreme chance of putting him out of my way. He could not deny that he had been giving his uncle aconitine. I could prove that his uncle had died of aconitine. He could not himself account for the facts. He was absolutely in my power. I did not wish him to be condemned, Maisie. I only hoped that he would leave the court discredited and ruined. I give you my word that my evidence would have saved him from the scaffold."
Hilda was listening with a set white face. "Proceed," said she, and held out the brandy once more.
"I did not give the Admiral any more aconitine after I had taken over the case, but what was already in his system was enough. It was evident that we had seriously underestimated the lethal dose. As to your father, Maisie, You have done me an injustice. You have always thought that I killed him." "Proceed," said she. "I speak now from the brink of the grave, and I tell you that I did not. His heart was always weak, and it broke down under the strain. Indirectly I was the cause. I do not seek to excuse anything, but it was the sorrow and the shame that killed him. As to Barclay the chemist, that is another matter. I will not deny that I was concerned in that mysterious disappearance, which was a 7 days' wonder in the press. I could not permit my scientific calm to be interrupted by the blackmailing visits of so insignificant a person. And then, after many years, you came, Maisie. You also got between me and that work which was life to me. You also showed that you would rake up this old matter and bring dishonor upon a name which has stood for something in science. You also, but you will forgive me, I have held on to life for your sake as an atonement for my sins. Now I go. Cumberledge, your notebook. Subjective sensations, swimming in the head, light flashes before the eyes, soothing torpor, some touch of coldness, constriction of the temples, humming in the ears, a sense of sinking, sinking, sinking.
It was an hour later, and Hilda and I were alone in the chamber of death. As Sebastian lay there, a marble figure, with his keen eyes closed, and his pinched, thin face whiter and serener than ever, I could not help gazing at him with some pangs of recollection. I could not avoid recalling the time when his very name was to me a word of power, and when the thought of him roused on my cheek a red flush of enthusiasm. As I looked, I murmured two lines from Browning's Grammarian's Funeral: "This is our master, famous, calm, and dead, borne on our shoulders." Hilda Wade, standing beside me with an awe-struck air, added a stanza from the same great poem: "Lofty designs must close in like effects, loftily lying. Leave him still loftier than the world suspects, living and dying." I gazed at her with admiration. "And it is you, Hilda, who pay him this generous tribute?" I cried. "You of all women!" "Yes, it is I," she answered. "He was a great man after all, Hubert, not good, but great. And greatness by itself extorts our unwilling homage." "Hilda," I cried, "you are a great woman, and a good woman too. It makes me proud to think you will soon be my wife, for there is now no longer any just cause or impediment." Beside the dead master she laid her hand solemnly and calmly in mine. "No impediment," she answered. "I have vindicated and cleared my father's memory, and now I can live. Actual life comes next. We have much to do, Hubert." End of chapter 12, and end of the book of Hilda Wade by Grant Allen. Read by Lars Rolander. Thank you for listening. And for more exciting books, go to LibriVox.org.